She called him ugly until he took a bullet for her. Ariana thought she was too cool to care. To her, the filthy dog with a limp and scars was nothing but a creature to mock with her friends, just to fit in. He was ugly, broken, pathetic. But that night, when the house was dark and the storm outside turned the air electric, everything changed. Because that same dog crashed through the window, and in a blur of fur, blood, and snarls, he saved her. This is not just a story about a dog. It's about redemption, about learning what true beauty means, and about the unspoken love between a forgotten warrior and a girl who didn't know she needed saving. The gates of Laurel Ridge whispered open with the quiet elegance of a neighborhood that had nothing to prove. Beyond the manicured hedges and white-bricked walkways, behind the polished windows and pastel-painted shutters, lived Ariana Whitmore, a name that fluttered around schoolyards and PTA meetings like the scent of imported jasmine. She was 9 years old, small in frame but towering in presence. Her wardrobe was curated, her shoes spotless, and her voice carried a subtle sharpness that often went unchallenged. Ariana didn't need to shout to be obeyed. A glance from her chin tilted slightly, brows imperceptibly arched, was enough to command. And she knew it. That afternoon, she stood on the front porch of her family's colonial-style home, arms folded, pigtails tied with navy silk ribbons that matched her pleated skirt. Her expression was one of studied impatience, the kind that made nannies fumble and peers defer. She tapped one patent leather shoe against the concrete rhythmically, not because she was truly anxious, but because it was something people in charge did. Inside the house, the echo of silence was deafening. The marble countertops gleamed untouched. The chandelier above the staircase hadn't swung in days. Her parents were gone again. Her father was in Tokyo for a business summit that involved phrases like emerging markets and pre-IPO equity. Her mother, last seen boarding a plane in a cream trench coat and oversized sunglasses, was overseeing the opening of her third skincare boutique in Chicago. Their lives orbited the notion of important, and Ariana, as they often reminded her, was well taken care of. The one who did the actual taking care of her was Miss Carmen, a housekeeper who had worked for the Whitmores since Ariana was in diapers. Carmen was patient, warm-voiced, and had the quiet sadness of someone who had long accepted being invisible. She prepared Ariana's favorite snacks, laid out her outfits, and tidied her room before it ever had the chance to look lived in. And when Ariana threw tantrums, which she rarely needed to anymore, Carmen absorbed the venom like rainwater on old stone. In truth, Ariana never wanted for anything. When she wanted a unicorn cake for breakfast, she got it. When she demanded the newest smartwatch, the one none of her classmates had, yet it arrived the next day in a ribbon box. She had grown up believing that discomfort was optional, that the world should mold itself around her preferences, and that anything broken should simply be replaced. And yet, beneath all the surface-level perfection, the curated childhood, the French lessons, the ballet recitals, there was something she didn't quite recognize in herself. Boredom. Not the kind that made you sigh and reach for an iPad. This was quieter, heavier, the creeping sense that nothing was ever really enough. She wouldn't have been able to name it, of course, but it was there. In the way her fingers tightened on her juice box after her friends said something she didn't like. In how she arranged her dolls in perfect lines and got irritated when their heads wouldn't tilt the same way. In how sometimes she looked in the mirror and made faces at herself just to feel something different. Ariana liked control, not K's. Control gave her the illusion of importance in a house where her voice was rarely heard by the people who mattered most. When she was obeyed, when her friends followed her lead, it felt like proof that she existed not just as a girl with a name and a room full of toys, but as someone who could shape the world to her will. So when she stepped off the porch that day, heading down the sidewalk toward the neighborhood park, it wasn't just a stroll. It was an entrance. She passed white fences and blooming hydrangeas without really seeing them. She didn't wave to the neighbors, not out of rudeness, but out of habit. Her world didn't include gardeners or mailmen. She lived on a stage where only certain people mattered, and the rest were set pieces in the background. The sun cast long slivers of gold across the pavement. Ariana squinted, annoyed that the light touched her without permission. She pulled out a small pair of designer sunglasses, a gift from her mother, and perched them on her nose. A group of birds scattered from a nearby tree, startled by a passing car. Ariana didn't flinch. She hated birds loud, unpredictable, messy. They reminded her of Ethan, one of her friends, who often said the wrong thing and laughed too loudly. But she kept him around anyway. People like Ethan made her feel smarter. She reached the edge of the cul-de-sac, where the sidewalk curved toward the park. There, beneath the shade of the elm trees, was where she usually met her entourage, Chloe, Jenna, and Ethan. They always arrived a few minutes late, and Ariana always pretended not to mind, though inside she kept score. Today, she was already formulating what game they'd play, how they'd divide the playground equipment, who would be in charge of the mystery mission she invented weekly. Her imagination wasn't lacking, it just served her. Everything did. She adjusted her ribbon and looked out across the quiet street. The breeze ruffled her skirt, and a leaf danced across the pavement like it had nowhere to be. Ariana frowned. She didn't like being alone. Not really. Not when no one was watching her. She needed an audience, even if it was just her friends giggling at her jokes or gasping at her daring. The loneliness crept in like a shadow behind the sun, but Ariana blinked it away, straightened her back, and whispered to herself with faint annoyance, "They're late." The world would wait for Ariana Whitmore. It always had. The first to arrive was Chloe, breathless, perfectly coiffed, and trailing a faint scent of gardenia body spray she'd stolen from her older sister's vanity. She wore a peach-colored dress with sparkly straps and clutched a glittery purse as though it contained something important, even though Ariana knew it held only 2 lip gloss tubes and a squished granola bar. Chloe always tried too hard, and Ariana liked her for that. "Sorry I'm late," Chloe said quickly, eyes scanning Ariana's expression like a weather report. "My mom made me finish piano before I could leave." Ariana didn't smile. She simply tilted her head, the way she did when deciding whether to forgive someone. Chloe shifted awkwardly, her smile faltering. "I told her you were waiting," Chloe added, hoping that would buy her some grace. A beat. Then Ariana nodded barely and resumed walking toward the park. Jenna and Ethan appeared next, coming from opposite directions. Jenna's long braid swung like a metronome as she walked, her oversized sweater slipping off one shoulder to reveal a hint of a tank top underneath. She always wore clothes that made her look like she wasn't trying, which meant she tried a lot. Ariana had once accused her of copying her handwriting, and Jenna had cried, but only after Ariana turned her back. Ethan trailed a few steps behind, chewing the tip of his hoodie string and adjusting the straps of his neon green backpack. He was the only boy in the group, and while he sometimes said odd things or laughed at the wrong moment, he never questioned Ariana. That was enough to earn his place. "Ugh, it's so hot today," Jenna groaned, fanning herself dramatically as they all converged on the edge of the park. "Then don't wear sweaters like you live in the Arctic," Ariana said without looking at her. The others laughed. Jenna gave a sheepish shrug and muttered something about aesthetic. Ariana ignored her. The park unfolded ahead like a curated playground from a lifestyle magazine, smooth tan bark, freshly painted swings, and benches placed with almost obsessive symmetry. A single fountain bubbled at the center, surrounded by perfectly trimmed rose bushes. It wasn't a place for scraped knees and mud pies. It was a place where children rehearsed the art of being watched. They claimed their usual spot, a small hill near the edge of the slide, shaded by a willow tree. Ariana sat first, of course, spreading out her monogrammed picnic blanket like she was laying claim to the territory. Chloe knelt beside her, careful not to wrinkle her dress. Jenna dropped her canvas bag beside them and lay back on the grass, staring at the sky. Ethan flopped down last, awkward and quiet. "So," Ariana began, brushing invisible dust from her skirt, "who saw that thing on Jenna's story yesterday?" Jenna immediately turned red. "What thing?" "That filter," Ariana said casually, picking at a blade of grass. "Your nose looked like it was melting." Chloe burst out laughing. Ethan followed, more from habit than humor. Jenna stammered something, a protest or apology. It was unclear, but Ariana had already moved on. She liked steering conversations like this, dropping casual barbs dressed as jokes, watching reactions, controlling the tempo. Her words weren't meant to wound. They were meant to remind that she was the center, that everything turned when she turned. "Anyway," Ariana said, folding her arms behind her head, "we need a new game." "What about spy mission again?" Ethan offered quickly. "Like last week." "Too repetitive," Ariana replied. Chloe chimed in. "What about something like a runway show?" Jenna has those new sunglasses. Ariana gave her a flat look. We're not four. Silence. Then, almost as if summoned, a gust of wind rustled the tree branches overhead. Ariana glanced around, then smiled faintly. I have an idea, she said. The others perked up. It's called the circle. They all leaned in slightly. It's like this, Ariana continued. We each take turns picking someone in the park to observe. We watch them for 10 minutes and decide their life story. Points for the most creative. Ethan blinked. What do we win? Ariana shrugged. Respect. Cool, he said, even though he didn't really get it. Jenna, trying to redeem herself, pointed at a woman across the park feeding birds. That one. She's secretly a millionaire who hides gold coins in bird feeders. The others chuckled. Chloe added something about an underground bird mafia. Ethan made squawking noises. It was stupid. But it was fun because Ariana said so. They played for the better part of an hour, lounging in the summer sun, making up absurd stories about strangers who walked past. A jogger became a fugitive. A boy with a cast was secretly a karate champion. The more outrageous, the better. None of them noticed the shift in air at first, the moment something raw and uninvited entered their curated world. Ariana was mid-sentence, describing a woman in pink as a runaway queen from a forgotten country, when a low whimper, soft, strained, drifted on the breeze. She paused. Did you hear that? Chloe looked up. What was that? A rustling came from the other side of the hedgerow. A pause. Then, a shuffle of movement, the faint sound of nails scraping pavement. Jenna stiffened. Ethan sat upright. And then they saw it. A dog gaunt, filthy, ribs visible beneath its matted fur crept out from behind the trash bin near the drinking fountain. Its eyes, amber and haunting, flicked toward the children. It was a German shepherd, or what was left of one. The noble frame was there, but it had been hollowed out by hunger, fear, time. Its tail hung low. Its ears trembled at the slightest sound, and yet it stood, watching them. None of them moved. Not yet. Ariana's lip curled in disgust. What is that thing doing here? She was already reaching for a rock before the others knew what to do. The dog stood motionless, half hidden in the slant of shadows beneath the trash bin, as if even the sunlight had rejected it. Its coat, once a rich sable that marked the proud lineage of a German shepherd, was now clumped with grime and fleas, hanging in patches along its spine. Bones jutted beneath the skin like a living diagram of neglect. Each rib was a cruel reminder that somewhere, someone had forgotten this animal existed. It took a cautious step forward, its paw pads cracking softly against the pavement. Then another, its eyes, hollowed by hunger and haunted by something far older than fear, met Ariana's for just a second too long, and that was enough. Ew! Oh my gosh! Get it away! Ariana recoiled, her voice loud and sharp, slicing through the sleepy park like shattered glass. She stumbled back onto the blanket, brushing at her skirt as though the dog's very existence had stained her clothes. The others turned and gasped, not from compassion, but from second-hand disgust. Chloe covered her mouth with both hands. That thing's disgusting, Jenna muttered, shrinking behind Ethan. Yeah, Ethan agreed quickly, eyes wide. Is it sick? The dog flinched at the noise. Its tail tucked under so tightly it nearly vanished. Its body dipped low, defensive, ready to flee but not moving yet. As if something in it still hoped this wasn't another place that would hurt. Ariana scrambled to her feet. Her gaze darted around until it landed on a small stone near the base of the willow tree. Without thinking, without hesitation, she bent down and picked it up. The rock was smooth and flat, perfect for skipping across a lake, or in this case throwing at a creature too slow to escape the scorn of children. She stepped forward, chin high. Get lost, freak, she spat, winding her arm back. The dog didn't move. Ariana threw the rock. It missed, barely clattering against the concrete beside the dog's front paw. The sound echoed louder than it should have, too loud for the quietness of the park. A startled yelp tore from the dog's throat, raw and involuntary. And, in a single, panicked motion, it turned and bolted. Its legs tangled briefly as it slipped in the dust, then vanished behind the trees lining the edge of the path. Ariana stood there, chest heaving slightly, not from exertion, but from adrenaline. Her friends stared at her. Then Chloe laughed. It was light at first, then caught fire in the others. Did you see its face? Ethan cried between giggles. It looked like a skeleton with fur, Jenna added. Ariana smirked, soaking in their amusement. For a moment, she felt it again, that warmth, that fleeting rush of being at the center, of steering the mood like the captain of a ship. But somewhere, just outside the moment's spotlight, the wind shifted. It passed through the trees and over the sidewalk, catching Ariana's hair and pulling her gaze toward the far side of the street. There, behind the low wrought iron fence of a pale blue house, stood a man. Older, with stooped shoulders and silver hair that caught the light like paper ash. His posture was still, hands folded over the top of a walking cane. His eyes, deep set, unreadable, were fixed on her. He had been watching the whole time. Ariana blinked. Mr. Walter. She'd seen him before, mostly from a distance. He lived across from the park in the oldest house on the block, a quiet man with a porch full of faded plants and a rusty mailbox with a dent in its corner. He never attended the community BBQs, never waved from his car like other neighbors. He just watched and kept to himself. And now he was watching her. Their eyes met a flicker, maybe 2 seconds, long enough for Ariana to register something she didn't like. He wasn't scolding her. He wasn't even frowning, but there was a weight behind his gaze, a kind of silent disappointment that hit harder than any shouted lecture. She looked away first. "Let's go," she said abruptly, brushing past Chloe. "Where?" Ethan asked, scrambling to follow. "Somewhere else. This place smells." The others gathered their bags, still chuckling about the dog, already halfway forgetting it. But Ariana didn't. As they walked toward the swings, she glanced over her shoulder once more. Mr. Walter hadn't moved. The wind tugged at the hem of his shirt, but he stood rooted, not with anger, not even judgment, but something colder. Witness. Ariana shoved the thought away, focusing instead on a joke Chloe was telling about a classmate's crooked bangs. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't laugh. And behind them, beyond the laughter and shifting shadows, somewhere out of sight, a frightened German shepherd hid in the brush, licking the underside of its paw where the stone had bounced too close. Its breathing was shallow, its body trembling. It had trusted the wrong place again. It didn't take long for the dog to become a running joke. By the end of the week, it was no longer that stray. It was the thing, the mutt, the garbage ghost. Ariana had a name for it too. Scraps. She said it with a sneer, like the word itself had dirt under its fingernails. Her friends adopted it without question, repeating it in sing-song tones and whispers between giggles as they scanned bushes and alley corners for signs of the animal. The dog had become their game. Each sighting sparked a ritual. Chloe would gasp dramatically. Jenna would clutch her bag and squeal. And Ethan, forever eager to prove himself, would shout, "Scraps! Go back to the dump!" And Ariana? She let it all. The first time they saw the dog again, it was sniffing near a trash bin outside the bakery on Hawthorne Avenue. Its nose twitched at a half-eaten sandwich someone had tossed carelessly, the crust already soaked from condensation. "There it is," Chloe whispered, pointing. Ariana didn't hesitate. She picked up a discarded paper cup and hurled it in the dog's direction. It landed short, but the motion was enough to make the creature recoil. Its head snapped up, body tense, legs coiled to run. The look in its eyes wasn't wild. It was something worse, expectant, as though it had seen this scene before, countless times. The kids erupted into laughter as it fled, tail tucked so tightly it nearly vanished beneath its gaunt frame. "Scraps," Jenna called mockingly after it. "You forgot your garbage." Ariana laughed too. But it wasn't just amusement. It was something more electric, the high of power, of seeing something cower and knowing you caused it. In a life where she so often felt unseen by the people who should have mattered most, this was control. Ugly, intoxicating control. She began to look for the dog deliberately. They'd walk the perimeter of the park, cutting through alleys they normally avoided. When they found it, and they often did the same routine played out, throw something, say something cruel, watch it, run, reset. It was never close enough to touch, never close enough to truly hurt, but always close enough to hear. What none of them realized or cared to think about was that the dog had started learning their rhythms too. It knew the days they came, the routes they took. It tried to stay hidden, but hunger and habit kept it nearby. Sometimes it watched them from behind dumpsters or peeked from behind garden sheds with one eye trembling and alert. When it was sure they had passed, it would return to the places where scraps might fall, as though forgiveness could be scavenged in crumbs. And across the street, behind a curtain of ivy and a chipped wooden fence, Mr. Walter watched. Every day, he stood at his porch railing with a cup of black coffee and a look that could weather storms. He didn't speak, he didn't shout, but his presence was there, unmoving. His eyes followed the children the way a lighthouse follows ships, not to control but to prevent wreckage. He had seen this kind of cruelty before, subtle, casual, disguised as childhood. He had seen it grow, but he waited, not out of apathy, out of something else. Timing, maybe, or the understanding that some lessons, the hardest ones, had to hurt, to stick. One evening, as the sun bled low across the rooftops, Ariana spotted the dog again, this time near the storm drain behind the community center. It had something in its mouth, a piece of bread, crushed, dirty, but food. Ariana's jaw clenched. She picked up a stick, not a twig, a real branch. It was curved, heavy at one end, snapped clean like it had been meant to hurt. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked, half laughing, half curious. "I just want to scare it," Ariana said, already advancing. The dog's eyes met hers. It didn't run this time. It froze, legs stiff, mouth still clamped around the bread. "Drop it, Scraps," Ariana hissed. "That's not yours." She swung the stick, not hard, but with enough force to send it cracking against the sidewalk. The bread dropped. The dog flinched, then bolted into the shadows. Ariana stood there, chest rising and falling, not sure what she expected to feel, satisfaction perhaps. But all she felt was noise. In her ears, in her head, something buzzing, uncomfortable, like the silence after a scream. From behind the fence across the street, Mr. Walter lowered his coffee mug. His lips were pressed into a flat, unreadable line. His gaze stayed on Ariana longer than it should have. She turned away quickly, pretending not to see him. Later that night, after dinner, Ariana sat on her bed and stared at the blank page of her sketchbook. Her hand hovered above it with a pencil, but didn't move. Her room was pristine, organized, controlled. But inside her chest, something felt wrong. Not broken, just unsettled, like a chair that rocks slightly on even floors. She closed the book. Out her window, the stars blinked like faraway eyes, watching and maybe, just maybe, waiting. The afternoon heat lingered heavy on the pavement, thick and unmoving, like the breath of summer was holding itself in. The sky stretched wide and cloudless above the park, bleaching the grass and silencing even the birds. It was the kind of day when everything slowed down, everything, except Ariana. She was in motion. Her shoes tapped confidently along the curb as she led Chloe, Jenna, and Ethan past the playground and toward the shaded side street that curved behind the neighborhood community center. That corner forgotten, quieter, had become Scrap's territory. And Ariana knew it. She always knew. "There," Chloe said suddenly, nudging Ariana's arm. The dog was crouched low near a line of trash bins, its muzzle half buried in an old sandwich wrapper. It didn't hear them at first, but when Ethan's backpack squeaked, the creature's ears twitched and its head shot up. Its eyes caught Ariana's. It didn't run. Not immediately. Hunger had carved its instincts down to bone, and it had learned that food was fleeting, that sometimes enduring fear meant survival. So it held its ground, eyes wide but locked, chest rising in shallow, uneven breaths. Ariana stopped in her tracks. Then, wordlessly, she knelt and picked up a branch from the edge of the sidewalk. Not a light twig this time, but a thick stick, dry and brittle, with jagged edges where it had snapped. She stood tall, gripping it tightly in one hand like a scepter. "Let's see how brave Scraps is today," she murmured. Chloe shifted uncomfortably. Jenna bit her lip. Even Ethan hesitated. Ariana took a step forward. The dog lowered itself instinctively, muscles taut, ears flattened to its skull. Its body language screamed submission, yet there was something else in its eyes, not challenge, not even fear, just weariness. A tiredness born from being hunted one time too many. Ariana raised the stick slightly, angling it toward the dog. "What do you think you're doing?" The voice didn't come from behind her friends. It came from across the street. Ariana froze. Slow, deliberate footsteps crossed the quiet road, tapping with the faint rhythm of a cane on pavement. "Mister." Walter emerged from behind a wrought iron gate, wearing a faded flannel shirt and slacks that had seen better decades. His face was lined, not just from age, but from time, from things endured, things survived. His silver hair caught the sunlight like brushed steel. He said nothing at first, just walked. His presence alone seemed to still the air. The stick in Ariana's hand suddenly felt heavier. He stopped a few paces from her, gaze steady. "Put that down," he said quietly. Ariana blinked. "It's just a stick," she replied, but her voice didn't carry the same conviction as before. His tone didn't rise, but it deepened quiet, firm, immovable. "And that's just a dog. Doesn't make either one right in the hands of someone who wants to hurt." Chloe looked away. Jenna stepped back slightly. Ethan stared at his feet. Ariana's jaw clenched. "It's a stray. It's filthy. It keeps going through people's trash." Mr. Walter nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the German shepherd, who now stood completely still, watching him, ears still pinned, but body less tense. Recognition flickered faintly in the animal's posture, like it remembered a gentler presence once before. "Do you know, mister?" Walter said, voice calm as lake water. "What it's like for a trained working dog to end up like this? Alone? Starving?" Ariana shifted her weight. "It's not my problem, but you're making it yours," he said gently. "You hunt it down like it's a threat. You throw things. You call it names." She scoffed. "It doesn't understand." He looked at her, really looked not like a scolding adult, but like someone who saw something deeper. "Oh, it understands more than you think," he said. "They always do. Dogs read us better than we read ourselves. They remember hands, words, pain." Ariana didn't reply. Mr. Walter took a slow step closer and pointed subtly at the stick in her hand. "You don't know what that dog's been through. Maybe it lost its handler. Maybe it was injured, left behind when it couldn't keep up. You see dirt? I see scars." The silence that followed was different, thicker. It didn't demand an answer, it demanded thought. Ariana looked down at the stick. Her grip loosened, just slightly. The dog hadn't moved. It still watched her, but now with something less like fear and more like waiting. Her pride stirred like a thorn in her chest. She hated how he made her feel small without ever raising his voice. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, not quite defiant, not quite soft. "I want you to think," Mr. Walter said simply, "before you act. That's where kindness begins." A long pause. Then, with slow reluctance, Ariana let the stick drop. It hit the ground with a dry clack, the sound brittle and final. Mr. Walter nodded once. "That's a start." He turned without another word and walked back across the street. The cane clicked against the pavement, like punctuation marks in a sentence no one else understood. The dog remained frozen a moment longer, then quietly backed away, disappearing around the corner. Ariana stood still. The others didn't speak. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest and said, "Let's just go. But her voice lacked its usual sharpness. The edge was still there, but dulled. Inside her, a small discomfort twisted and refused to untangle. It wasn't guilt yet, not quite, but something was waking up, something she couldn't name. And it had started with a voice that didn't shout, but still made her listen. The room was silent, except for the rhythmic hum of the ceiling fan overhead, slow, mechanical, monotonous. It cast spinning shadows on the soft lavender walls of Ariana's bedroom, flickering like the turning hands of a clock that refused to let the night pass quickly. Ariana lay sprawled in the center of her canopy bed. Silk sheets twisted around her legs like a net. Her eyes stared up at the ceiling, blank and wide, her arms tucked behind her head. The digital clock on her bedside table blinked. 11:42 p.m. Too late to be awake. Too early to surrender. She told herself she wasn't bothered. She shouldn't be. That man, Mr. Walter, he didn't know her. He didn't know anything about her life, her rules, her world. Who was he to lecture her? And yet, every time she blinked, she saw the dog's eyes. Not just frightened, exhausted. Not just cautious, resigned. Like it had stopped expecting kindness a long time ago. Ariana groaned and flipped onto her side, kicking the sheets away in frustration. The air felt hot against her skin, sticky and oppressive. She reached for her tablet, flicked it on, scrolled through photos and gossip from Jenna's group chat, memes, filters, a blurry shot of Chloe's pool party. Nothing stuck. Nothing felt loud enough to drown the feeling in her chest. She tried music next, something upbeat, flashy. But it grated against her ears like metal scraping glass, so she yanked off the earbuds and tossed them aside. 11:53 p.m. She buried her face into her pillow. In the darkness behind her closed eyes, an image rose again, the dog, unmoving, just watching her. Not snarling, not running, waiting. And then, just as vividly, Mr. Walter's voice. They always do. Dogs read us better than we read ourselves. They remember hands, words, pain. She had scoffed at him earlier, called it old man drama in her mind. But the words had clung to her like burrs, impossible to brush off. Why did she care? She didn't owe anyone an explanation. She hadn't done anything wrong, right? Yet, beneath the layers of defiance, a foreign sensation prickled, a tightness in her chest. Not enough to make her cry, Ariana didn't cry, but enough to make her feel off balance, as if the axis of her world had shifted just a little, just enough to notice. It wasn't guilt. Not yet. But it was something. She reached for the water bottle on her nightstand and took a sip, staring out at the moonlight spilling through the open curtains. Laurel Ridge looked so peaceful from up here, neat lawns, perfectly pruned hedges, porch lights glowing like sentinels. It was a world that kept everything unpleasant at a distance. And yet, somewhere just beyond those trimmed hedges and curated flower beds, that dog was out there curled beneath a bush, maybe, trembling from the night chill, stomach hollow, ears perked at every passing car, still waiting, still alone. Ariana sat up in bed. Her fingers traced the edge of her pillowcase absently. She tried telling herself the same thing she always did. It wasn't her fault. The dog didn't belong here. Someone should call animal control. It wasn't safe. It wasn't her job to care. But each sentence rang a little hollower than the last. And the image of the stick falling from her hand, that sound when it hit the pavement echoed louder than all of them. Clank. It had sounded like the end of something. But maybe it was also the start. She hugged her knees to her chest and rested her chin there, the silk of her pajamas cool against her skin. A memory surfaced, brief, dusty, uninvited. She must have been 6 or 7, crying in the kitchen after a bad fall off her scooter. Her mom hadn't come. Her dad wasn't home. It was Maria, the housekeeper, who had sat with her, held her hand, pressed a damp cloth to her scraped elbow. Maria hadn't said much, just held her gently. The way that dog looked at Mr. Walter today, like he was the only one in the world who hadn't forgotten, it was once something more that Ariana swallowed hard. She hadn't realized until now that it had reminded her of herself, in a way. That quiet, aching need for someone to see you. Not the version everyone assumes, but the real thing beneath. 12:11 a.m. She lay back down, this time without the restless tossing. But still, sleep didn't come. The dog was in her mind again. Not the muddy fur or the ribs showing through its coat, but the eyes. Those eyes. They weren't angry, just tired. And maybe, a little hopeful. Ariana turned her face to the pillow and whispered into the darkness, as if to no one. I didn't mean to scare it. The words hung there, raw and quiet, like a fragile bridge suspended over something deep and unfamiliar. Outside, the night wind stirred the leaves, and for the first time in a long time, Ariana didn't feel entirely in control. She wasn't sure she liked it, but she wasn't sure she hated it either. It was the kind of Saturday afternoon that Laurel Ridge children usually spent lounging poolside or getting chauffeured to ballet class. But Ariana stood alone at the entrance of the neighborhood park, arms folded, lips pressed into a thin, impatient line. Her group chat was quiet. Chloe had a dentist appointment. Jenna was visiting her cousins in the city. Ethan, as always, offered a vague excuse involving chores, which Ariana didn't believe for a second. The audacity of being left alone her on a weekend gnawed at her nerves. She wore a crisp white sundress and designer sneakers that had never seen dirt, clutching her phone like a lifeline, but no messages came. For the first time in a long time, there was no one to follow her. No one to echo her laughter, nod at her jabs, or pretend her every comment was worth applause. The silence was inconvenient. She kicked a pebble with her shoe, watching it skitter across the pavement and land beside a bench bleached gray by sun and time. The park, at this hour, was half deserted. A few distant joggers. A toddler with her nanny. Birds chirping too loudly in trees that had always felt ornamental, never wild. Ariana sighed. She could go home. She should go home. But she didn't want to go back to that big, empty house where Maria hummed lullabies to herself and the halls echoed with nothing but the tick of modern clocks. Her feet, restless, began to move. She followed the path past the swings, past the sculpture that had once been in a magazine, and around the edge of the manicured grass until she reached the part of the park that no one talked about. A sloped patch of earth overgrown with weeds and half-wild bushes, half hidden behind a rusted maintenance sign. Beyond it was a crooked fence, bent in the middle where time or children had pressed too hard. A narrow gap yawned between two panels. Ariana hesitated, then ducked through. She found herself on a gravel path that led downhill, scattered with broken twigs and the occasional soda can. Birds fled at her approach. The air was cooler here, shaded by trees that hadn't been trimmed to perfection. Nature, it seemed, was allowed to breathe in this forgotten pocket. At the end of the slope lay a shallow, moss-ringed drainage ditch, dry now, but lined with cracked concrete and old leaves. The city must have intended it for runoff decades ago, then forgotten it existed. Ariana stared at it like she'd discovered something secret, and in truth, she had. The isolation here was total. The manicured world of Laurel Ridge felt 100 miles away. No Wi-Fi, no eyes watching, no rules, just dirt and wind and stillness. She sat on a flat rock near the edge of the ditch, brushing off imaginary dust before lowering herself. Her dress wrinkled slightly, but she didn't care. Not today. The silence wasn't so inconvenient anymore. It was strange, like being outside herself. For a moment, she listened, not to her own voice or the buzz of a phone, but to the rustling of leaves, the call of a bird, the distant barking of a dog. Her posture slouched a little, her jaw unclenched. Then, a soft scrape caught her attention. She stiffened. Across the ditch, behind a cluster of weeds, something moved. Slow, hesitant. She squinted. And then she saw it. The dog, matted fur, gaunt ribs, eyes the color of smoke and memory. It stood half-shielded by foliage, one paw lifted mid-step, uncertain whether to flee. They stared at each other. No barking, no growl. Just silence. Ariana's breath caught in her throat, not out of fear this time, but surprise. A week ago, she would have screamed, hurled something, made a scene. But today, alone with the wind and the ditch and the emptiness inside her chest, she didn't move. The dog slowly lowered its paw. It didn't advance, didn't retreat. It just was. A creature out of place, uninvited, unwanted, like she had been. Once, long ago, before she learned to wear arrogance like armor and use sarcasm as a shield. Her eyes flicked to its fur tangled, dirty. A burr clung to one ear. And yet, despite everything, it stood with a strange kind of dignity. Not proud, not defiant, just enduring. For a heartbeat, something shifted in her. A breath she hadn't known she was holding trembled at her lips. And then a rustle in the distance. A voice calling for a child, a gate slamming shut. The dog flinched, turned, and disappeared into the brush without a sound. Ariana sat there, motionless. She didn't know how long she stayed, only that the silence afterward felt different than before. Less empty, more filled with questions she couldn't yet name. She stood, brushing dust from her dress. Her fingers trembled slightly. As she walked back up the path toward the world that expected her to be polished and loud, she glanced once over her shoulder. The ditch was still, but something inside her wasn't. The sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows over the hidden part of the park. Ariana returned to the ditch, drawn not by curiosity this time, but by something more elusive, an ache she couldn't name. She told herself she just wanted to look again. That was all. The silence welcomed her back, like a secret kept. Her sneakers crunched the dry gravel as she made her way down the slope, following the same path from yesterday. A branch snapped beneath her foot, startling a squirrel from the brush. She barely noticed. The ditch was just as she had left it, cracked concrete, overgrown edges, the smell of damp earth. Still no cell signal. Still no witnesses. Still that strange, forgotten calm. She approached the edge and peered down. It didn't look deep. No more than 5 feet. The kind of thing any kid could jump down into and climb out of, or so she thought. She'd never done anything like that before. Her life was measured in manicures and chauffeurs. But now, here, away from everyone, she wanted to feel something real. Just once. So she tested the slope with one foot, then another. The dry leaves shifted beneath her weight, but she kept going. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but something that felt oddly like defiance. Or maybe hope. And then her foot slipped. A sharp cry tore from her throat as she tumbled, arms flailing, the world spinning. She hit the bottom with a hard thud. Pain shot through her elbow and up her spine. Her dress snagged on something sharp and tore with a sound that felt louder than it should have. Ugh, she groaned, pushing herself upright. Her knees were scraped. One shoe had come off, and dirt clung to her hair like accusation. She tried to stand, only to realize the walls of the ditch were steeper than they looked. Each time she tried to climb, her fingers clawed at loose rock and dry mud that crumbled beneath her hands. Her sneakers, even the ones still on, slid uselessly. Okay, she whispered to herself, brushing hair from her face. No big deal. I'll just call someone. She pulled out her phone. No signal. Not even a flicker. Panic began to squeeze her chest. She looked up. The sky above was a narrowing circle. Trees leaned overhead, silent and indifferent. The path she'd come from was hidden by shrubs, and the world beyond that might as well have been 1,000 miles away. She screamed. "Hello, somebody, I'm stuck." Her voice cracked, echoing off concrete and swallowed by wind. Hello? But no one came. Her throat began to burn. Her palms stung from climbing. She tried again, digging in with all her weight, but the slope gave way under her. She slid back down, collapsing in a pile of leaves and frustration. Her eyes welled with tears, hot, unexpected. "This is so stupid," she muttered to no one, hugging her knees. "This is so stupid." But the words broke into sobs. For the first time in years, Ariana didn't feel powerful, didn't feel clever or in control. She felt 9, just 9. A little girl in a ditch with dirt on her face and no one coming to find her. And then a rustle. She froze. It was soft at first, like the wind brushing through leaves. Then a crunch of gravel, a presence. She looked up, eyes rimmed red, breathing ragged. There, at the top of the slope, stood the dog. The German Shepherd. Still muddy. Still thin. But in the fading light, his eyes were different than she remembered. Not just fearful now. Curious. Alert. Watching her with the quiet intensity of something that understood what pain looked like because it had lived in it. Ariana Starev. She wiped her face with her sleeve, blinking through the dirt and tears. The dog didn't move. He simply stood, head tilted slightly, like he was waiting for something. Or someone. She swallowed hard. "You," her voice cracked. "You came back." Her words were barely more than a whisper, but the dog didn't flinch. He took a cautious step forward, then another, until he stood at the edge of the ditch, gazing down at her like a sentry. Ariana didn't understand why, but something inside her fluttered. "I'm stuck," she said softly, as if explaining herself to him. "I fell." The dog stayed, not barking, not growling, not running, just staying. And somehow, that meant more than she could explain. Ariana wiped at her nose with the back of her wrist, smearing dirt across her cheek as she stared up at the strange silhouette above. The dog hadn't moved. Not an inch. He was still there, standing firm like some sentry out of place in her manicured world. Thin ribs pressed against a dusty coat, one ear twitching, amber eyes locked on hers, not angry, not kind, just seeing. And she hated how that made her feel. "You just gonna stand there?" she snapped, instantly regretting how weak her voice sounded. He blinked slowly. A gust of wind moved through the trees, sending a whisper through the leaves. The world held its breath. Then the German shepherd stepped forward, down the slope. His paws touched the incline with a cautious grace, testing each spot before placing his full weight. One wrong move and he'd tumble beside her. Yet, somehow, he moved like he had done this before. Like broken ground was home. She watched him descend, heart racing, mouth slightly open. "You're not seriously coming down here," she muttered, as if saying it would stop him. "I don't need help." But he kept coming. Each step slow, intentional. The muscles along his shoulders moved like coiled wire strong, but wary. His eyes never left hers. When he reached the bottom, Ariana held her breath. The dog paused a foot away, close enough now for her to see the healing scar near his jawline, the burrs tangled in his fur, the quiet thrum of breath through a body that had known hunger. She shifted back, scooting away. "Don't come any closer," she warned, though her voice wavered. But the dog didn't advance. He simply sat. It was the stillness that undid her. Something in the quiet dignity of his posture, not pleading, not demanding, chipped a crack in her armor. They stayed like that for a while. Girl and dog. Two creatures stuck in a place they never intended to be. She finally looked down at her scraped palms. "Fine," she mumbled. "You win." With reluctant effort, Ariana stood. Her knees wobbled, and she gasped as pain flared through her ankle, twisted worse than she thought. She staggered, caught herself, and before she could fall again, the dog stepped forward and pressed his side to her legs. Warm. Steady. Solid. She froze. "What are you doing?" she whispered. The shepherd didn't answer. He just stood there, gently leaning against her, grounding her, like he'd done this before. Like instinct told him where her center was broken. Ariana hesitated, then placed a trembling hand on his back. His fur was rough, matted, but real. He didn't flinch, so she leaned, just enough to balance. And together, they moved. Slowly, awkwardly, the girl with pride too big for her age, and the dog with wounds older than her lifetime made their way toward the slope. The dog climbed ahead, then paused halfway, turning back with a glance. She understood. She reached forward and grabbed his scruff, not tightly, just enough. And with her other hand pressing against the wall of the ditch, she climbed. 1 step. 2. Her shoe slipped, but the dog didn't move. He anchored her, bit by bit, scrape by scrape. She made it to the top. They collapsed in a heap of breath and dust at the edge of the ditch, hearts thudding against the silence. For a long while, neither moved. Then Ariana sat up, brushing leaves from her dress, and looked at the dog lying beside her. He looked back. And in that unguarded moment, something passed between them. Not trust, not yet, but something quieter, older, the kind of wordless knowing that doesn't need translation. A memory, a whisper, an echo of, "You're not alone anymore." Ariana looked away first. "Stupid dog," she said, voice brittle. "Could have bitten me." The shepherd didn't react. "Should have left me down there," she added, standing up stiffly. Still, no response. He just sat again, watching her. She clenched her fists. "I didn't ask you to help," she snapped, the edge of pride flaring up like a dying fire. Her voice cracked. He tilted his head just slightly, and for a flicker of a second, she saw her own defiance reflected in his gaze, but softened, like he understood too much to judge. It infuriated her, and broke something open. Ariana turned away sharply, brushing dirt from her scraped knee, pretending her eyes weren't wet. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't throw a stone either. When she looked back, he was already walking away back into the brush, tail low, head turning once, before disappearing behind the slope. She stood there long after he was gone, and for the first time in her life, silence made her feel small. And being small made her feel human. "So what? You fell into a ditch?" Jenna's laugh cut across the park bench like a paper cut shallow, but sharp enough to sting. "Obviously not fell," Ariana replied, brushing her freshly ironed dress like the very idea was absurd. "I slipped, the edge gave out, and I got out on my own. Duh." She punctuated the lie with a sip from her water bottle, eyes narrowed as if daring them to question it. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And your dress just ripped like that?" It caught on a branch, she snapped. God, why are you being so nosy? Chloe, seated beside her with perfect posture, wrinkled her nose. My mom said they found you crying near the old drainage path. Gross. That place is like full of raccoons or something. Ariana's stomach twisted, but she didn't flinch. I wasn't crying. I was mad. I dropped my phone. They seemed to accept that, mostly because they never questioned Ariana too hard. She'd taught them, well, deflect, diminish, distract. The first rule of staying on top. But today, her control felt thinner, like the skin of a balloon stretched too tight. Anyway, Jenna continued, legs swinging off the bench. Did you guys see that dog again? The ratty one? Ethan laughed. The zombie mutt? I saw him near the school fence yesterday. Looked like he hadn't eaten in weeks. Chloe made a mock gagging noise. Ew. I hope animal control picks it up soon. It's probably rabbit or something. Ariana went still. She watched a squirrel dart across the grass in the distance, felt the heat of the sun press down on her shoulders. Her fingers clenched slightly against the side of her leg. That dog still hanging around? She asked, trying to sound bored. Totally, Jenna said. It was near the bakery, too. People were throwing crumbs at it like some stray pigeon. So pathetic. Ethan chuckled. We should mess with it again. Maybe leave a fake bone or something with hot sauce on it. Chloe shrieked with laughter. But Ariana didn't join in. Her eyes drifted across the park, to the place where the trees thickened near the old ditch. The image came uninvited rough fur beneath her palm, the steady weight of his body as she leaned into him, the strange warmth that lingered long after. She blinked it away. I don't care about that dog, she muttered. But the words didn't land the same, not even to herself. Really? Ethan teased. You were the one who first threw a rock at it. You're like the queen of making that mutt run. A beat passed. Ariana forced a smirk, but it barely held. Maybe I'm over it, she said. Chloe blinked. Over it? Yeah, it's not fun anymore. The dog doesn't even fight back. It just stares like a statue. It's boring. They looked at her, confused. Ariana looked away. The wind rustled through the leaves. A dog barked in the distance. For a moment, the sound made her heart lurch. She stood up too quickly. I have piano lessons, she lied. Chloe frowned. But it's Saturday. I know. It's a makeup session. Whatever. She didn't wait for their response, just grabbed her backpack and walked. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't care if they whispered behind her back. That afternoon, she sat in her room and stared out the window. The sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the backyard where the sprinklers hissed in rhythmic intervals. She watched droplets catch the light, wondering without meaning to where he might be now. The dog. The one she never thanked. The one she told no one about. The one whose eyes, muddy and silent, had shown her more truth than all the praise she ever got for spelling bees and recital ribbons. She hated how much she remembered him. Hated how much she couldn't forget. In the silence of her room, surrounded by framed certificates and untouched toys, Ariana felt something foreign twist in her chest. Not guilt, not kite, but a restlessness, a discomfort that grew louder the more she tried to shut it out. Later that week, they passed by the alley near the school again. The dog wasn't there. Jenna clicked her tongue. Maybe someone finally called the pound. Ariana flinched. Chloe smirked. Good. He was ugly anyway. They laughed. And for once, Ariana didn't. Not because she suddenly became kind. Not yet. But because cruelty had stopped feeling like power. It started feeling like noise. And deep down, she realized she didn't want to be the one throwing stones anymore. Ariana sat cross-legged on her bed, the soft hum of her desk fan whispering across the quiet room. Outside, the summer light was fading blue shadows gathering at the edge of the windowsill, as if the evening had crept in unnoticed. She stared at the blank page in her sketchbook. The lines had come easier when she wasn't trying. Doodles in margins, angry scratches during lectures. But now, her pencil hovered, unsure. Her eyes drifted to the edge of her desk where her phone lay face down. Unbothered. Unneeded. She hadn't texted Chloe back. Or Jenna. Even Ethan's dumb meme in the group chat had gone ignored. She exhaled slowly. as if letting go of their noise could quiet the one inside her. Then, without thinking, her hand moved. The pencil kissed the paper. She started with the eyes. Not perfect circles, but orbs too big for the head she hadn't drawn yet. Wide, tired, uncertain. There was something broken in them, but not defeated. Something watching, waiting. Next came the ears. Too large, too sharp. Then the slope of the head, the ragged collar of fur. She didn't know when she'd memorized his shape, the angle of his back, the way his ribs rose like ridges of a forgotten mountain. His tail, limp but alert. His stance, wary but willing. Line by line, he emerged from the white space like a ghost being remembered. When she was done, she closed the book quickly, not because she was ashamed, but because something in her chest ached. Later that evening, after dinner, Ariana stood in front of the mirror in her bathroom. The overhead light buzzed faintly. Her reflection stared back the same thick lashes, the same brushed waves in her hair, the same necklace she wore every day because Jenna once said it looked rich. But she looked longer this time, long enough to see past the polish. Her face was the same, but something behind her eyes had shifted. And all at once, the memory came. The feel of wet earth beneath her knees, the sharp sting of fear, and then him. The German shepherd, appearing at the edge of the ditch like some phantom called by panic. How his ears twitched with every sob. How he crept forward slowly, like she was something fragile he might break. How she clung to him with shaking arms, and he didn't pull away. He should have. After everything she had done, he should have turned and left her there. But he didn't. He stayed. And he saved her. She blinked back the sting in her eyes. "Why?" she whispered. The mirror had no answer. That night, she pulled the sketchbook from beneath her pillow and opened to the page again. The drawing looked older now, like it belonged to someone else. Still, she added a line beneath it. Just one, written in soft graphite. "He didn't have to help me." She didn't know why she wrote it. But once it was there, she didn't erase it either. The next morning, she woke before her alarm. The sky outside was still pale with dawn. For the first time in weeks, Ariana didn't reach for her phone. She just lay there, eyes wide, heart quiet. Somewhere, the echo of paws on gravel still lived in her memory. The way his eyes looked into hers like he could see something even she couldn't. The sky was bleeding into dusk as Ariana stepped off the porch of Chloe's house, her arms wrapped around herself. The hangout had been brief, hollow. She had spent most of it nodding, offering tight smiles, and watching the clock on the kitchen wall. Laughter felt foreign now, sharp at the edges, like it didn't belong to her anymore. The air was cooling fast, brushing through the trees with a whisper. Laurel Ridge was quiet at this hour, like it was holding its breath. Her sandals clicked lightly on the sidewalk as she walked the familiar route home, her shadow stretching out ahead in the amber light. She didn't notice him at first. Just a flicker behind her, a footstep that didn't match her own. The hairs on her arms rose before she turned her head. At the end of the block, a man in a dark hoodie walked slowly, nothing strange. Except he was alone, and when she crossed the street, so did he. Her heart gave a thud. Maybe it was nothing, probably nothing, but her steps picked up, and so did his. Now she could hear him the scuff of his boots, steady, too steady, a rhythm meant to seem casual, but it wasn't. She reached for her phone in her back pocket. Empty. She'd left it at Chloe's crossings. Panic bloomed in her chest, sharp and immediate. She cut through a small path between two houses, the shortcut she used when she was late for piano lessons. Gravel crunched beneath her feet. Lights were farther apart here, trees thicker. Behind her, the man followed. Ariana's breath hitched. She broke into a run, twisting down a narrow alley that sliced between a row of garages. She hoped there was a way out the other side. But when she reached the end, her hope slammed into cold brick. Dead end. She spun around, heart in her throat. The man was there, 10 paces away, silent, closer now. He didn't say anything, didn't have to. His presence was heavy, like the air had thickened around him. Ariana backed into the wall. Her voice cracked into the evening. "Leave me alone, Em." The man didn't stop. Then, from the shadows, a low, guttural growl. It vibrated through the alley like a warning etched into the wind. From behind a dumpster, something moved. Eyes caught the light first. gold, and full of fury. The German shepherd stepped into view. His stance was rigid, teeth bared, tail straight like a spear. No barking. Just that deep primal sound, the growl of something that didn't bluff. The man froze. "Easy," the man muttered, hands half raised. The dog took a step forward. Another growl. Then a lung. Not to bite, but enough to make the message crystal clear. Not her. The man stumbled back. He didn't run. He retreated, eyes never leaving the dog until he turned and vanished down the opposite end of the alley. Ariana stayed frozen against the wall. Her legs were shaking. The dog remained still for a moment longer, ears alert, gaze scanning the alley as if expecting more. Then, slowly, he turned to her. Ariana met his eyes again. And this time, she didn't look away. There was no fear in them, no anger, just presence. He had come. Again. She couldn't understand it. Didn't she throw stones? Didn't she laugh with her friends as he cowered? Why? Why was he here now? She whispered it out loud. "Why do you keep helping me?" The dog didn't answer, of course, but he lowered his head, as if accepting her confusion, as if to say, "Because someone should." Ariana sank to her knees, tears threatening to rise, not from the scare, not from the alley or the man, but from the weight of something breaking inside her, a barrier she didn't even know she had built. The dog stepped closer. She didn't flinch this time. He stopped a foot away. Saturday. Quiet. Guarding. She stayed like that for several minutes, crouched on the front porch, arms wrapped around her knees, her cheek pressed against the rough denim of her jeans. The chill from the ground seeped into her bones. But she didn't move. Not yet. Not until her breath steadied, and her heart stopped trying to burst out of her chest. Around her, the night exhaled. Crickets chirped hesitantly from somewhere in the grass. A breeze rustled through the hedges, brushing across Ariana's face like a mother's hand that hadn't been there in a while. The only thing louder than the silence was the thrum of her pulse, echoing through her ears like a memory she couldn't shake. And beneath it all, she could still smell him. The dog. That warm, earthy scent like wet asphalt, sun-scorched leaves, and something older, something feral and comforting all at once. She hadn't realized how close he'd gotten, how she'd clung to him when the man lunged, how he'd growled, barked, thrown his own body forward like a shield. He didn't know her. Not really. She hadn't fed him, hadn't pet him, hadn't even looked at him with anything resembling kindness. And yet, he chose her. For the first time in Ariana's life, she understood what it meant to be protected, truly protected, not because someone was paid to do so, or expected to, or told it was their job, but because someone, something, decided she was worth it. She blinked, and her tears finally spilled, quietly, without drama. No sobbing, no hiccups, just a silent stream, slipping down the sides of her face, hot against the cool of the evening air. It wasn't sadness, not entirely. It wasn't even fear. It was something harder to name the slow unraveling of everything she thought she knew about loyalty, about judgment, about who she was, and who she could still become. Eventually, she stood. Her legs ached from crouching, but she didn't rush. She glanced back once, into the darkness of the alleyway that stretched beyond her home. No sign of him, no movement, just shadows thick and unmoving. But she felt him, even now, felt the weight of what he'd done, felt the wordless promise he'd made. So she slipped the front door shut behind her and crept upstairs without a sound. She passed her parents' bedroom. The door was cracked, light spilling onto the hallway carpet in a thin golden line. She paused, considered saying something, telling someone, but the words stayed lodged behind her teeth. What would she even say? That a dog, the same one she and her friends had called ugly, weird, broken, had appeared out of nowhere and saved her life? That he'd fought off a man, possibly armed, definitely dangerous, and then vanished into the night like some kind of wounded ghost? They wouldn't believe her. Worse, they would. And then everything would change. Animal control, police reports. Attention. They'd come for him, cage him, investigate him, take him away, and lock him up again the way she now understood he had already been once. There were scars on his side she hadn't seen before, a notch in his ear. The way he moved, not just limping, but train. Precise. Like something had been beaten into him and drilled over and over until it became reflex. No, she wouldn't say a word. Not yet. She padded into her room, shut the door gently behind her, and clicked off the light. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the moonlight spilling in from the curtains. And for the first time in years, she walked to the window. It used to stay shut. Always. She didn't like the cold, didn't like the noise, didn't like the feeling of being seen by neighbors, by stray animals, by the outside world that had never really felt safe to her. But tonight, her fingers reached for the latch. She cracked the window just an inch, then two. The cool night breeze drifted in like a sigh, brushing her cheeks, tugging at the edges of her sweatshirt. Then she leaned forward, elbows on the windowsill, eyes searching the street below. Nothing. Just a flickering lamppost, the empty alley, a few houses still lit across the block. And then, softly, barely above a whisper, she said it. Thank you. To the dark, to the dog, to someone who didn't ask for anything in return. And for a moment, she thought she saw movement, a shape, a low silhouette passing under the streetlight, pausing at the edge of the hedge, ears perked, tail still, watching. He didn't come closer, but he didn't leave either. She stayed there until the figure disappeared, folding into the darkness like smoke. And that night, Ariana did something she hadn't done in a very long time. She slept, really slept. Not the kind of restless, tossing, half-dreaming sleep that left you more exhausted in the morning, but the kind where the body knows for now it is safe, that something or someone is keeping watch. Outside, the breeze picked up, and just beneath the windowsill, at the corner of the house where the bushes met the fence, a figure curled into the grass, chest rising and falling in a slow, even rhythm. A soldier without orders, a guardian without a leash, a dog who had chosen her. The next morning, Ariana sat at the breakfast table, staring blankly into a bowl of cereal that had long since gone soggy. Her spoon made soft clinks as she stirred it absently, her other hand resting motionless against her chin. Her mother moved around the kitchen humming to herself, none the wiser to the tremor hiding beneath Ariana's stillness. Sleep had been brief and fractured. Each time her eyes drifted shut, the alley would return. The man's silence, the dead-end wall, the weight of helplessness pressing into her ribs, but most of all the eyes. Not the man's, his. The dog's eyes, the German shepherd. They had followed her into every dream, like shadows that wouldn't fade. Not accusing, not angry, just watching, just there. She didn't understand it. She didn't want to. But she couldn't stop thinking about him. Heading to school early today? Her mother asked, breaking the silence. Ariana blinked. Yeah, got something to finish before class. It was a lie. But lately, lies came more easily than truth. Truth had claws. She left the house with a plastic sandwich bag tucked in her hoodie pocket, leftover chicken bits from dinner the night before. She hadn't told anyone why she took them. She hadn't said a word about the night before, or the time before that, in the ditch. Every time she opened her mouth, the words sat there like broken glass. Better not to touch them. The shortcut behind the fence, through the narrow trees near the old storm drain, had become a kind of ritual now. Quiet, empty, a place without expectations. She stopped at a flat stone just beneath the gnarled oak, her eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing. She crouched and laid the food down carefully, as if setting an offering she didn't fully understand. Then she stood, wiped her palms against her jeans, and left without looking back. It wasn't the last time. She did it again 2 days later, a sandwich and a slice of apple. This time, when she returned that evening on the way home, the food was gone. The next week, it became a pattern. Sometimes the scraps were taken. Sometimes they weren't. Once, she found only the apple missing, the bread untouched and damp from dew. Another time, the food was still there, but paw prints deep and unmistakable were pressed into the mud just a few feet away. She knelt by them, fingers hovering above the impressions, tracing their shape in the air. Something about those tracks felt sacred, real in a way nothing else did lately. Each visit was silent. She never called for him, never stayed long, never spoke his name, not that she knew it. But she thought of him often. At night, she would lie awake, The image of that powerful body standing guard at the alley's end burning behind her eyelids. The way he didn't hesitate. The way he didn't look at her like she deserved what had almost happened. She hated how much that mattered. Her friends still laughed about the dog, sometimes scowled at names, joked about how it probably had fleas or rabies. Ariana didn't laugh anymore. She didn't correct them either. She just stayed quiet, her gaze lowering, hands tightening around the straps of her backpack. Something inside her was shifting, like a tide pulling back to reveal what had always been buried beneath the surface. She didn't recognize it yet, but it made her stomach flutter in strange ways. That Thursday, after practice, she stopped by the stone again. She placed a slice of cooked beef wrapped in a napkin on the ground, weighing it down with a small, smooth rock. Then, on impulse, she added something else. A sketch, folded into quarters, drawn hastily during math class. It was a pencil rendering of the shepherd's eyes. Just the eyes. She had captured the light in them, how they reflected more than they revealed. She placed the paper gently beside the meat and stood. The wind rustled the branches above her. A leaf fluttered down. She didn't hear anything. No bark, no rustle of paws. But as she walked away, she felt it again, that prickle at the back of her neck. Like someone was watching, not with menace, but with understanding. That night, she wrote in her journal for the first time in months. She didn't mention the alley. She didn't mention the food. She just wrote 3 words. He came back. And below that, in smaller letters, as if admitting it even to paper was too much. Why do I want him to? The sun had just begun its slow descent, bleeding gold across the treetops as Ariana knelt beneath the gnarled oak once again. She set down the scraps, a strip of bacon folded into a paper napkin, and beside it, a clean bowl filled with water she'd carefully carried from home in her backpack. She straightened, brushing dirt from her knees, when a voice calm, low, and unmistakable spoke behind her. Kindness looks different when nobody's watching. Ariana spun around. Mr. Walter stood a few paces away, leaning gently on his cane. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes were warm, the kind of warmth that doesn't judge. I wasn't... She started, then stopped. There was no point pretending. He nodded toward the bowl. He trusts you now. Not many can say that. Ariana looked down. I don't think he even likes me. Dogs like him don't show affection the way others do, Walter replied. Not after what he's seen. She looked up. What do you mean? Walter tilted his head toward the narrow path behind the trees. Come, I've got cold lemonade and a porch that catches the breeze. If you're willing to sit a spell, I can tell you a story or two. Ariana hesitated, then followed. His porch was old, but kept with care, the paint on the railing chipped, yet clean, and the rocking chairs well worn but steady. He poured 2 glasses from a sweating pitcher and handed one to her. They sat in silence for a moment. Somewhere, a bird called out, and cicadas hummed like a distant engine. You've seen how he walks, haven't you? Walter asked finally. She nodded. His back leg, he limps. That leg took shrapnel, he said softly. Grenade blast. Lost most of the muscle. The vet called it a miracle he survived. Ariana turned slowly toward him, eyes narrowing. You know him? Walter gave a slow nod. I know of him. He was part of a unit based not far from here. Special K-9 Task Force. Elite. Trained for search and rescue, explosives detection, even live combat. They called him Bishop back then. She whispered the name like it was a secret. Bishop. He served 3 tours. Afghanistan, Syria, then back stateside for disaster deployments. Earthquakes, hurricanes. He saved more lives than I can count. But something happened on his final mission. Walter looked away, the ice in his glass shifting as he gripped it. His handler, a young sergeant named Cole, was killed in an ambush during an extraction. Bishop stayed with the body until they recovered it 2 days later. Wouldn't leave his side, refused food, nearly died there too. Ariana swallowed hard. What happened after that? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. They brought him home, tried to retrain him, but he kept breaking through fences, wouldn't bond with anyone, would lash out in confusion, then retreat like he hated himself for it. Classic PTSD signs. And you know what happens to dogs with combat trauma and no handler to claim them. He didn't need to say it. They left him, she said flatly. Walter nodded, dropped off near the outskirts one winter. Figured he'd wander off, fade into the woods. But Bishop, he doesn't know how to quit surviving. A gust of wind stirred the leaves. Ariana felt something catch in her throat. "He saved me. Twice," she said. "I know," Walter replied. "I saw him watching you that night in the alley. I wasn't far behind. He moved before I could." Ariana blinked. "You followed me?" "I walk every evening. Keep to the quiet roads. Saw the man too. But Bishop, that dog moves like wind. Was already on him before I even reached the corner." They sat a while longer, the silence between them no longer uncomfortable, just shared. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" she asked. Walter sipped his lemonade. "Because some stories aren't mine to tell. But maybe they're yours to carry." She looked down at her glass, the condensation tracing delicate paths across her fingers. "What happens to a dog like that?" she asked. "When the world forgets him?" Walter looked out toward the trees, where dusk had begun to settle. "Sometimes, if they're lucky, someone remembers." The house was quiet, too quiet. Ariana closed the door to her bedroom with a soft click, as if the stillness might shatter if she wasn't careful. The hallway light spilled beneath the crack, a pale sliver against the dark wood floor, but she didn't turn on her lamp. Instead, she sat down slowly at the edge of her bed, back hunched, arms wrapped tight around her knees like she was trying to hold herself together. The weight of everything pressed in Mr. Walter's voice, calm but heavy. Bishop's name echoing in her ears like something sacred she'd once spit on. The look in the dog's eyes every time she pushed him away. Mocked him, feared him. She had mocked a soldier, not just a dog, not just some stray with a limp. A soldier. Her fingers dug into her palms, nails half moons of regret. She remembered how she had laughed loud and sharp when her friends threw rocks, how she rolled her eyes when he limped near the edge of the sidewalk, how she called him broken, useless, trash. But that trash had dragged her out of a ditch, had faced down a predator in a dark alley with nothing but his scars and instinct. Twice he had placed himself between her and danger. And she hadn't even said thank you. Her throat burned. She pressed a fist to her chest, trying to keep it all from rising. But it came anyway, not a sob, not yet, but something worse. A quiet, shuddering gasp. The kind that cracked through the ribs before any tears fell. She stood suddenly, pacing her room like a caged thing. Her hands trembled, and she didn't know what to do with them. So she grabbed her sketchbook, flipped to the back pages, the hidden ones. There he was, Bishop, drawn from memory, 3 times. In the shadows, with his ears alert. That small scar across his brow. Eyes that didn't accuse, only endured. She couldn't look at it anymore. Ariana tossed the sketchbook to the floor and sat beside it, burying her face in her arms. Pride had always been her armor, but now it felt like rusted steel, too heavy, too sharp, pressing inward. "I didn't know," she whispered. Silence answered. "I didn't want to know." "Oh." Outside, the night wind stirred the branches, casting moving shadows across the wall. Ariana lifted her head slowly, eyes drifting to the window. Through it, she could just barely see the shape of the oak tree in the distance. She had left nothing tonight, no food, no water. And still, she wondered if he had come. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice hoarse. "I'm sorry." Her breath fogged the glass. She didn't expect forgiveness. She didn't deserve it. But the words were there now, spoken into the dark like a thread she didn't know she'd been holding. She stayed by the window for a long time, watching, waiting. Not for a shadow or a bark, but for something in herself to shift. She didn't know that down the street, a car she didn't recognize had rolled past her house once, then twice, its engine low, windows black. She didn't hear the door of that car close softly 2 blocks away. Didn't see the figure step out and walk into the dark. But Bishop would. Soon, rain tapped faintly against the windows, rhythmic at first, like a lullaby that couldn't quite put her to sleep. Ariana lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The storm had been building all evening, thickening the air, turning the sky an eerie bruise purple. Now, past midnight, thunder grumbled low like something ancient, stirring beneath the clouds. She turned over for what felt like the 100th time. Her blanket twisted around her legs. Something felt off. The kind of off that settles deep in your gut, beneath logic and explanation. A prickle at the nape of the neck. The unshakable feeling that she was not alone. A creak. She froze. The sound hadn't come from outside. Her breath caught in her throat. She sat up slowly, straining to listen. Another noise, soft but unmistakable, the sound of a door being opened downstairs. Not the wind, not the old pipes. A footstep. Her pulse kicked. She grabbed her phone, heart thundering as loud as the storm, but the screen didn't light up. Dead. She had forgotten to charge it after school. Another creak. Closer. Ariana slipped out of bed, bare feet touching the cold floor. She tiptoed to her door and pressed her ear against it. The hallway was dark, still. But below, something moved, the faint shuffle of shoes on tile, the quiet rustle of drawers being opened. She reached for the baseball bat. She kept behind the door, a relic from childhood games she never cared for. Tonight, it felt heavier than it should have. With every step down the stairs, her breath shallowed. The air smelled different. Not like her house. Not like her family. It smelled like sweat and metal and something sharp like fear, if it had a scent. She reached the bottom step and paused, peeking around the corner toward the living room. There he was. A man, cloaked in shadow, crouched near the cabinet. A gloved hand sweeping through drawers like he knew what he was looking for. A flashlight held low in his other hand, casting erratic beams across the walls. His face was obscured by a black ski mask. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't some drunk neighbor or a lost delivery guy. This was deliberate. He was stealing from them. Ariana's hand trembled on the bat. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her mind screamed to run back up the stairs, lock her door, call for help that wouldn't come. But she didn't. Instead, she took one step into the room. The floor creaked. The man froze. They both stared. The beam of the flashlight found her face, harsh and white. She blinked, stunned by its sudden glare. He moved first, fast, straight toward her. Ariana let out a sharp gasp and stumbled backward, swinging the bat instinctively. It missed, slicing through air, but bought her 2 seconds enough to turn and run. She bolted back up the stairs, heart hammering so loud it drowned out the thunder outside. Behind her, heavy boots followed. She reached her room and slammed the door shut, bracing her back against it. No lock. Why hadn't they fixed the lock? The doorknob rattled. She screamed, then silence. She held her breath. Had he left? But then she heard it, the sound of glass breaking downstairs. A different window. Another way in. He wasn't done. Ariana backed away from the door, knees shaking, eyes darting to the window. It was still open, a crack from earlier. The storm was howling now, wind rushing like voices. The trees swayed violently, rain pelting sideways against the house. She ran to the window and peered out, and saw him, standing in the street, soaked to the bone, barely lit by the flickering street lamp. Bishop, staring up at her. Then movement behind her. A floorboard groaned just outside her bedroom again. She turned. Footsteps. Closer. The door handle jiggled harder this time, then stopped. Then came the sound of something heavier, like a shoulder slamming into wood. She backed against the far wall, clutching the bat. "Please," she whispered. Not sure who she was, begging the man, God, the universe. Then came a sound she hadn't expected. A deep, guttural growl. From outside, followed by a crack of something hitting the door hard. Then chaos. But not inside. Below. Outside. She ran back to the window in time to see a blur of motion, Bishop leaping the front fence, charging through the open yard like a shadow of muscle and fury. A scream tore through the storm. Not hers. His. And suddenly, Ariana wasn't alone anymore. The door splintered on the second slam. Ariana's breath snagged in her chest. Her fingers gripped the bat so tightly her knuckles turned white. The hallway light flickered behind the intruder's silhouette, giving him the shape of something monstrous, not just a man, but a shadow with intent. He saw her, and he smiled. It was the kind of smile you never forget. Not wide, not toothy, just a subtle shift behind the mask that told you he was in control, that he believed he had won. Ariana's feet refused to move. She tried to scream, but no sound came. The man raised something, a crowbar. Then the world shattered. Literally. A sound like the sky cracking open tore through the room, glass exploding, wood groaning, curtains flailing wildly as a dark mass surged through the bedroom window. The man turned too late. The German shepherd hit him like a thunderbolt. Ariana dropped the bat, stumbling backward as the two figures crashed to the floor. The dog, Bishop, though she had never dared say the name aloud, tore into the man with a ferocity she had only seen in movies. It wasn't wild or chaotic. It was precise, controlled, trained. This wasn't just an attack. It was a mission. The intruder shouted, twisting violently beneath the dog's weight. He swung the crowbar once, twice a sickening thud as it struck Bishop's side. The dog yelped, but didn't let go. Blood hit the wall like ink spilled from a story too brutal to rewrite. "No!" Ariana screamed, falling to her knees, hands outstretched as if she could somehow stop time, protect them both. The man shoved hard and managed to get a knee under Bishop's chest, throwing him off just enough to scramble to his feet. His eyes darted to Ariana. He lunged for her, but Bishop was faster. A blur of tan and black muscle launched forward again, slamming into the man mid-stride. They crashed into Ariana's desk, sending books and a lamp clattering to the ground. The crowbar skittered across the floor, landing inches from Ariana. She didn't think. She moved. Scooping up the cold steel, she stood shakily, heart pounding in her ears. The man shoved Bishop off with a scream and turned toward her face, flushed, mask torn, eyes wild. He reached out. Ariana swung. The metal connected with his arm. He howled, stumbled back. Bishop didn't wait. With a deep growl that came from somewhere ancient and broken and full of purpose, the dog leapt again, this time clamping his jaw around the man's forearm, dragging him down with a force that cracked bone. Ariana watched, frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. The intruder finally stopped moving, pinned, broken, defeated. The only sound left was the wind moaning through the shattered window and the low, rumbling growl still vibrating in Bishop's throat. And then silence. Heavy, sacred. Ariana dropped the crowbar. Her legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, only a few feet from the dog who had just saved her life again. Bishop let go slowly. Jaw, slick with blood, side heaving. There was a gash just behind his shoulder, deep and bleeding freely. "Hey," Ariana whispered, voice trembling, eyes locked on his. "You're hurt." Bishop looked at her, those dark, intelligent eyes that held so much more than instinct. For the first time, she truly saw him. Not just a stray, not just a shadow, but a soul. A soldier, a protector who had once belonged, been loved, been trained to serve, and who had been thrown away. Yet here he was, still serving, still saving. "You came back," she whispered again, crawling closer. Her hand reached out hesitantly. Bishop didn't flinch. She touched the side of his face, warm, coarse fur damp with rain and blood. He leaned into it, just slightly. It broke her. "I'm sorry," she choked. "I'm so sorry I ever laughed at you." Bishop licked her hand, just once. Gently, somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. The neighbor must have called. Help was coming, but it hadn't come in time. Bishop helped. "Ariana?" Her mother's voice tore through the house, ragged with panic. Feet pounded on the stairs, one after another in breathless thuds. Then came her father shouting, confused, a door banging open downstairs. But Ariana couldn't answer. She was on the floor, cradling the dog whose body had shielded her from death. Blood soaked into her pajama sleeves. The coppery tang filled her nose, mixed with the rain and broken glass. Her hands trembled against his fur. He didn't move. Not at first. His breathing was shallow, uneven. Then, barely a blink. A low whine, soft as breath. "I'm here," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. "You're okay. You're okay." The truth was, she didn't know if he would be. She didn't even know his name. Ariana. Her parents burst into the room, and for a moment, everything froze. Their eyes scanned the wreckage, the shattered window, the blood on the carpet, the unconscious intruder cuffed under a police officer's knee. And then they saw her, on the floor, with him. Her mother dropped to her knees beside her. "Oh my God, Ariana, are you hurt?" She shook her head. Her father stared at the scene like he'd wandered into someone else's nightmare. What the hell happened? Two don't know, Ariana gasped. Her chest tightened as sirens grew louder, blue and red lights flashing against the walls like a silent alarm clock waking a dream. He broke in. I saw him downstairs. He was going to hurt me. And then he came. He saved me. Again, she looked down at the shepherd. Her voice cracked. I think he's dying. Paramedics flooded the room. Officers followed, weapons drawn, orders sharp. One of them secured the unconscious man. Another started taking statements, snapping pictures. None of it mattered to her. Only the shallow rise and fall of the dog's chest. Back up, miss. Let's assess the animal, a paramedic said gently, kneeling beside her. She didn't move. Number, he doesn't like strangers, please. That's when another voice entered the room, one neither aggressive nor alarmed. Warm. Measured. Let me try. Ariana looked up. Mr. Walter stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, a flashlight hanging from one hand. No one had called him, but somehow he knew. Maybe he'd heard the sirens. Maybe something deeper told him this old dog, this forgotten soldier, had found his purpose again tonight. He stepped forward slowly, kneeling beside Ariana and the shepherd. Hey, old boy, he whispered, his hand moving gently toward the dog's neck. You did good. You did real good. The shepherd opened his eyes, just barely, and wagged his tail. A single, small thump against the floor. He needs a vet now, Ariana said. He's bleeding too much. I'll drive, Mr. Walter said without hesitation. Wrap him in that blanket. I've got a crate in the truck. Ariana didn't even notice the glass still embedded in her arm as she helped lift the dog with her father and the paramedics. She didn't feel the cuts, the bruises, the aching cold of her bare feet on the gravel outside. All she felt was his body, growing heavier with every breath. Rain slapped their faces as they carried him to Mr. Walter's truck. The engine roared to life. In the passenger seat, Ariana cradled his head on her lap, whispering every few seconds just to keep him tethered. Stay with me, please stay with me. You're not allowed to leave now. The truck sped down familiar streets, sirens fading into memory behind them. Inside the cab, silence thickened. Then Mr. Walter said, almost to himself, They always deserve names. Ariana looked down. The dog's eyes met hers, faint, flickering. But what if he already had one? She whispered. He did, Mr. Walter replied, eyes on the road. They all did, but sometimes they need a new one, when they choose a new person. End of W. Her throat closed. She looked back at the shepherd, bloody, broken, but alive. And for the first time, she saw not a stray, not a soldier, but someone who had fought for her. Twice. She touched his paw, her voice a murmur drowned only slightly by the rain. Valor, she said. That's your name now. The tail thumped again. Once. Then stillness. But this time, peaceful. Not the stillness of surrender, the stillness of trust. The fluorescent lights in the veterinary ER buzzed faintly overhead, too bright, too cold. The kind of sterile glow that made time feel heavier. Ariana sat between her parents, elbows on her knees, hoodie sleeves tugged down over blood-speckled hands she couldn't stop wringing. Across from them, a clock ticked louder than it should have. It was 3:12 a.m. They had been waiting for over 2 hours. A coffee machine hummed in the corner. The receptionist whispered into a phone. Somewhere behind the double doors, the dog Valor lay sedated, cut open, patched together. Ariana hadn't spoken since they arrived. Her mother offered her tea. Her father asked twice if she wanted to go home and come back later. She said nothing. She couldn't, because if she opened her mouth, she might scream. He had almost died. For her. Again. And this time, there had been so much blood. She pressed her forehead to her palms, elbows digging into her thighs. I didn't even thank him, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Not really. Her father reached over, placing a hand on her shoulder. He knows. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe that dogs understood things humans never said, understood gestures, silence, trembling hands, and whispered names in the dark. But her heart wouldn't stop hammering. Guilt clung to her like a second skin. All those times she'd walked past him with a smirk. All those times she laughed when her friends mocked him the ghost mutt, the Scarface. And now he was the only reason she was alive. What if he doesn't make it? she asked softly, her voice cracking mid-sentence. Her mom wrapped an arm around her. "They're doing everything they can, sweetie. But that doesn't mean he'll survive," Ariana said. "What if I only just started seeing him and it's already too late?" She didn't realize she was crying until her mom dabbed her cheek with a tissue. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold it back. The wave, the ache, the deep clawing helplessness of waiting. "Animals like him," Mr. Walter had said as they rushed through the rain. "They don't give up easy. They've seen worse. Been through worse. This dog, he's already decided you're his." That should have comforted her, but it only made the silence now feel more unbearable. Ariana leaned back in the plastic chair, arms crossed tightly across her chest. She stared at the double doors, willing them to open, willing someone to come out and say, "He made it. He's resting. You can see him." But no one did. Her mother sat quietly beside her, fingers knitting and unknitting the strap of her purse. Her father paced now and then, hands in his pockets, then sat again, then stood the same cycle, on repeat. Ariana watched a small child stumble sleepily into the room from another corridor, clutching a stuffed rabbit. His parents followed, speaking softly to the vet tech who greeted them. Somewhere, someone else's dog was either being saved or lost. She glanced down at her hands again. Dried blood stained her fingernails. Not hers. His. Valor. The name had slipped from her lips like instinct, not a name she'd planned, not something she'd thought about. But it fit, because that's what he was. Not a stray, not a mistake. He was courage. He was fire and loyalty and sacrifice wrapped in fur and scars and those quiet eyes that had looked at her like she was worth saving even when she wasn't. The doors finally hissed open. A man in green scrubs stepped out, tired face, gloves off. His expression was unreadable. Ariana stood. He glanced at his clipboard, then looked up at her. "You're the girl who brought in the German Shepherd?" She nodded. He offered a small smile. "He's a fighter." Her knees nearly gave out. "He lost a lot of blood," the vet continued. "Took a blade to the shoulder and lower flank. Punctured lung, some torn muscle, fractured rib. We repaired what we could. It's going to be a long recovery, but he's stable and alive." A sob broke from Ariana's chest before she could stop it. Her mother caught her, holding her tight. The vet paused, then added gently, "You can see him if you'd like. He's sedated, but I think he'd rest better if he knew you were nearby." Ariana nodded through the tears. They followed him past the doors, down a quiet hallway where the hum of machines replaced the ticking of the lobby clock. Each step felt heavier and lighter, all at once, like grief and relief trying to outrun each other inside her chest. When they reached the recovery room, she hesitated. The vet opened the door, and there he was, wrapped in blankets, tubes in his side, oxygen mask loosely secured, one paw bandaged. But alive. Ariana stepped in slowly, heart in her throat. She knelt beside the table and whispered his name, Valor. His ear twitched, and somehow that tiny movement broke her. She took his paw gently in both hands and bowed her head, tears falling freely now, not just for the fear or the guilt or the relief, but for the bond forged in silence, in sacrifice, in something deeper than words. And in the stillness of that room, for the first time, Ariana didn't feel like a stranger in her own skin. She felt seen, protected, and maybe, just maybe, redeemed. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the slanted blinds of the vet recovery room, casting pale gold lines across the sterile floor tiles. Machines hummed softly. The rain from the storm had finally stopped, but its weight still lingered in the air, in Ariana's chest. She hadn't left the clinic. She'd spent the night curled in an armchair in the corner of Valor's room, legs tucked beneath her, hoodie drawn tight. Her parents had gone home at 5 a.m., after much persuasion, but she'd refused to leave, not until she saw his eyes open. And when he finally stirred just after 7:12, it was like watching a miracle breathe. His lids fluttered. A quiet whimper rose in his throat, almost like he was checking if it was safe to return. Ariana sat up instantly. "Valor?" she whispered, careful not to startle him. One eye opened, unfocused at first, then the other. Then, slowly, his tail moved. Just once, The faintest thump. Ariana covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking from the flood of emotions she'd held back all night. The vet entered a few minutes later, clipboard in hand, and a weary but satisfied smile on his face. He's awake. That's a good sign. We were concerned about the internal bleeding and stress on his lungs, but he's holding steady. Rest is going to be critical for the next few weeks. Is he in pain? She asked, eyes never leaving the dog. He's medicated. He'll be sore, but he's tougher than most dogs I've ever treated, the vet said, kneeling to check Valor's bandages. Frankly, tougher than most people. Ariana nodded, then looked at the German Shepherd. He looked smaller now, not because of his size, but because of how vulnerable he was the way he lay still. Not out of obedience, but because it was all his body would allow. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "Thank you," she said, barely louder than a breath. "For saving me." Again, Valor's ear twitched. She leaned closer. "You didn't have to come back. You could have kept walking that night. Let someone else deal with it. But you didn't. You chose me, even when I didn't deserve it." Sing. There was no answer, of course. No bark or whine or wag. But his eyes half-lidded, amber and deep, blinked once, as if to say, "I would do it again." She reached out and gently rested her hand on the fur between his ears. The texture was rougher than she expected, coarser, scarred in places. But beneath it there was warmth, a pulse, life. Her hand stayed there for a long time. The vet watched quietly, then cleared his throat. "He's going to need monitoring. He's got 3 stitched wounds, fluid drain tubes, and possible nerve trauma in his right leg. It'll take time." "Can I bring him home?" Ariana asked without hesitation. The vet blinked. "Eventually. But that's a serious commitment." "I know," she said. "You'd need to keep him quiet. Isolate him from stress. Give him meds twice a day. Change his dressings. I'll learn." Her voice didn't waver. "I'll do whatever it takes," she added, her eyes locked on Valor's side, where the rise and fall of his chest had steadied into a soft rhythm. "He doesn't belong on the streets anymore. Not after what he's been through. Not alone." The vet regarded her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "But I want to keep him here under supervision for a few more days. Once he's stable, you can take him home under the condition that I show you how to care for him properly." A.D. Ariana finally turned to him. Deal. The word came like a promise, like something sacred. Later that day, Mr. Walter arrived. He brought a fresh change of clothes, some food, and a quiet smile. He said nothing when he saw Ariana curled up again beside Valor's bed. He just handed her a sandwich and sat in the other chair. "He's stronger than he looks," he said eventually, voice low. "But even the strongest ones, they heal faster when someone believes in them." Ariana glanced at him. "Did he have someone before?" "Mr. Walter Sahid. Once. A long time ago." "Do you know his name? His real one?" The old man looked at the dog for a while. "He had a call sign, probably. But names come from those who see us." She nodded. "Then his name is Valor." Mr. Walters smiled faintly, almost like he approved. "That's a good name." The sun climbed higher outside the window. A soft breeze stirred the edge of the blanket wrapped around Valor's frame. He slept most of the day, but every now and then he shifted just enough to remind them he was still fighting. By nightfall, Ariana had already started a list of supplies: bandages, gauze, antibiotic ointment. She even scribbled a note in her phone: "Buy a dog bed, one with memory foam, and a name tag." She didn't say it aloud, but in her heart, something had shifted. She wasn't just someone who had been saved anymore. She was someone who would protect him back, no matter what it took. The living room was unusually quiet that evening. Ariana sat cross-legged on the floor, a notepad in her lap, and a pencil turning slowly in her fingers. Across from her, her parents shared the couch, her mother holding a cup of untouched tea, her father's arms folded, his eyes thoughtful, distant. The house still smelled faintly of antiseptic and dog fur leftovers from when they brought Valor home earlier that day. He was upstairs now, resting in the corner of Ariana's room, a soft blanket tucked beneath his bandaged side, breathing steady but shallow. No one had said much since arriving back, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was full of everything that had happened and everything they weren't sure how to put into words. Finally, Ariana spoke. "I want to keep him. Her mother looked up first. Her father followed a beat later. I know it's a lot, Ariana added, already anticipating their objections. He's injured. He needs care. He's not exactly a golden retriever from the shelter, but he saved my life. Twice. Her voice caught on that last word. I thought I knew what courage looked like, she continued. But that night, when he crashed through the window, he didn't even hesitate. He came for me, and I think he's been doing that his whole life. Running toward danger, protecting people who never even knew his name. Her mother set the tea down. I mocked him, Ariana whispered. Called him names. Laughed with my friends like he was some stray nuisance. But he's not. He's someone, and he deserves to be somewhere he's loved. Her father exhaled slowly, then leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He's a soldier, he said softly. Ariana blinked. What? I read about dogs like him. K9S, from the military or police, trained for years. Smart, disciplined, loyal to a fault. When they lose their handlers, it breaks something inside. A lot of them can't adjust back to civilian life. So, they disappear, wander, until they find someone, her mom added gently. Ariana nodded. He found me. Her dad studied her face, the growing certainty behind her words, the way her hands clenched the notepad as if it grounded her. You know this won't be easy, he said. You'll have to wake up early, give meds, check his wounds, deal with trauma responses, maybe aggression. It's not a pet. It's a promise. I know. He looked to his wife. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then he turned back to Ariana. Okay. Ariana froze. Okay? Her mom smiled, brushing hair behind her ear. We've seen the way you look at him, and the way he looks at you. It's not just gratitude. It's trust. That's rare. Tears pricked Ariana's eyes. You can keep him, her dad said. On one condition, anything. You let us help. This isn't just your burden. It's a family one. She nodded through the tears, her throat tight with emotion. Deal. Just then, the front door creaked. Mr. Walter stepped inside, carrying a small brown paper bag and a bundle of documents. His old coat was damp at the shoulders from the drizzle outside, and his shoes left faint prints on the hardwood floor. He stopped when he saw their faces tear-streaked, relieved, united. So, he said, adjusting his cap, I take it the council has reached a verdict? Ariana laughed, wiping her eyes. Unanimous. He smiled. Not the polite one he wore in town, but a real one. The kind that touched the edges of his weathered eyes. Well, he said, holding up the bag, I brought some turkey scraps. A peace offering, from one veteran to another. He handed it to Ariana, then set the papers on the coffee table. His name was never officially recorded, but I found traces of his training unit, Camp Riker, New Mexico. Discharged 2 years ago after his partner was killed overseas. No one claimed him after transport. He slipped through the cracks. A heavy silence followed. He's been searching ever since, Mr. Walter added. For a place to belong. For a mission, maybe. But I think he's found it now. Ariana's mom reached over, placing a hand on the old man's arm. Thank you for helping him. And her. He nodded, eyes softening. He won't be easy, he warned, voice lower now. PTSD in dogs is real. He may panic at loud noises, flinch at shadows, have nightmares. But if there's one thing I've learned in all my years, healing starts when someone simply stays. They all looked toward the staircase, where the faint rhythm of breathing could just barely be heard, deep, steady, alive. Ariana rose, walking over to the steps, her hand brushing the railing. Then we stay, she said, as long as it takes. And upstairs, behind a cracked door, a German shepherd stirred in his sleep, no longer a stray, no longer nameless. He was home. Mornings felt different now. There was still quiet, still the same soft creak in the hallway floor and the scent of toast drifting from downstairs, but now there was something else, a heartbeat that wasn't hers, a shadow that wasn't threatening, a presence that had slowly shifted from stranger to sentinel. Valor lay at the foot of Ariana's bed, his head resting gently on his outstretched paws. His left ear twitched at every noise. Half alert, even in rest, bandages still wrapped his ribs. The cotton just slightly discolored where his wounds were healing, but the rise and fall of his chest had become more even, more sure, as if he was finally breathing in peace. Ariana watched him from her desk across the room, pencil hovering over the page. The sketch beneath her hand was rough at first, the outline of a muscular body, sloped ears, intelligent eyes. But her strokes grew gentler as she went. She paused often, looking up to study his features not as someone merely drawing, but as someone trying to understand. She hadn't drawn like this in months, maybe longer, not since before the fight with Mia, before the hallway whispers, before the quiet ache of loneliness started clouding her joy. She glanced back at the paper. Valor was turning into more than a shape, now he was becoming real. Lines softened where his gaze had tension drawn into the slope of his shoulders. The faint hint of a tail curled, not tight and afraid, but resting, settled. A soft thump broke her focus. She looked up. Valor had moved. Just a small shift, but it mattered. He had raised his head, and his eyes, deep, weathered, impossibly human, were looking right at her. Ariana didn't speak. She didn't want to break the fragile thread between them. He blinked slowly, then did something that made her breath catch. He wagged his tail. It was barely there, a twitch, a sway, but it was enough to fill her chest with something warm and bright. A confirmation, a step. "You're really staying, huh?" she whispered. Valor tilted his head, the way dogs do when they're trying to translate your soul. She rose slowly from the desk and walked over, crouching near him, keeping her hands at her sides. No sudden movements. She'd learned that. "I don't know everything you've seen," she murmured, "but I know it left marks, and I know I added a few." She lowered her gaze. Shame still lingered, like smoke that refused to clear. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, "for the names, for laughing, for not seeing you." A moment passed in silence. Then Valor shifted again, slow, deliberate, and placed his head against her knee. Ariana froze. It wasn't a nudge. It wasn't a test. It was trust. A tear slid down her cheek before she could stop it. She reached out, brushing the fur between his ears. It was coarser than she expected, Sunday-worn, weather-beaten, but beneath that was warmth. A pulse, a being. She stayed like that for a while, hand in his fur, the two of them sitting in a bubble of unspoken forgiveness. Later that afternoon, she began drawing again, page after page. Not just sketches, portraits. Of Valor looking out the window, nose tilted toward the breeze. Of him dozing in a patch of sunlight, the gauze on his side catching a glint of gold. Of his eyes steady, alert, full of something she didn't have a name for, only a feeling. Each drawing became an act of honoring, a way of saying, "I see you now," a way of understanding what had once gone unnoticed in the blur of fear, pride, and distance. She pinned them to the walls, filled her room with versions of him, each one capturing a different part of his journey, not just through her house, but through her heart. By the end of the week, he followed her more easily. If she left the room, his ears perked. If she came back, his tail lifted, not wagging wildly, but enough to say, "You matter to me now." He didn't bark, didn't whine, but his presence was constant, solid. He became her silent shadow. And yet, nothing about him felt heavy. He was like a sentinel from another time, bearing memories that no one asked to carry, still choosing to protect, even when no one deserved it. One evening, Ariana caught her dad watching them from the hallway. "Didn't think he'd warm up so fast," he murmured. "He's not warming up," she said softly. "He's remembering how." Her dad blinked, then nodded. "He's lucky to have you." "No," Ariana replied. Her fingers brushed behind Valor's ears as he leaned into her touch. "I'm lucky he came back." It began with a leash, old leather, worn at the edges, but the metal clasp still clicked with confidence. Mr. Walter handed it to Ariana that morning with the quiet authority of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "No sudden movements," he said gently. "Confidence is calm, not force." Ariana nodded, though her fingers trembled as she reached for the leash. Valor stood beside her, not tense, not entirely relaxed either. Like a soldier waiting for a command he might not trust yet. The sun had barely crested the rooftops. A cool breeze stirred the dew on the grass. Ariana stood barefoot in the backyard. her hair still messy from sleep, Valor's deep eyes watching every breath she took. "Okay," she whispered. "We're learning together." Mr. Walter had offered to help with Valor's rehabilitation, not just because he was trained for it, but because he'd seen the weight Ariana carried. The kind of guilt that didn't need words to be understood. "He still knows his training," Mr. Walter had explained that first morning. "But trauma rewires things. Sometimes you have to teach them it's safe to remember." So that's what they did. Every morning at 7 a.m., before her phone buzzed and the world demanded her attention, Ariana met Mr. Walter in the backyard with Valor. They practiced basics. First, sit, stay, heel voice firm, gestures clear. At first, Valor was hesitant. He flinched at sudden sounds, turned his head away when hands reached too fast. But when Ariana brought out the kibble, gently said, "Good boy," and met his eyes without flinching, something began to shift. He responded, slowly. Not always perfectly, but something uncurled inside him. A guarded muscle, a memory not completely buried. "Mister." Walter showed Ariana how to hold her posture straight but soft. "You're not commanding him," he said one morning, watching her work with quiet pride. "You're offering leadership. There's a difference." Ariana absorbed every word like gospel. She started taking notes, practiced hand signals in her room, whispered commands under her breath while brushing her teeth. Valor, to her amazement, picked up faster than she expected, like the muscle memory was still there, just waiting for kindness to unlock it. Every time he followed a command, she lit up. It wasn't just joy, it was purpose. She had never looked forward to mornings like this before. She learned how to correct gently, not with fear, but with consistency. When Valor got distracted by a squirrel and bolted halfway across the yard, she didn't yell. She breathed, called him back with the calm steadiness Mr. Walter had taught her, and he returned. Every success was a small victory, not just for Valor, but for the girl who once rolled her eyes at him from a window. At night, Ariana stayed up researching dog psychology. She scribbled command charts, planned treat rotations, even made him a feeding schedule complete with little paw print stickers for every day they succeeded. "Someone's obsessed," her mom teased one evening. Ariana didn't deny it, because she was. Not with the idea of training a dog, but with the wonder of being seen by one, trusted, chosen. One afternoon, after a successful session, Mr. Walter poured 2 lemonades and handed one to Ariana as they sat on the porch steps. "You've got a gift," he said, his voice rough like gravel, warmed in sunlight. She blinked. "Me?" He nodded. "You listen. You don't just speak at him, you speak to him." Ariana looked out at Valor, who was lying on the grass in the sun, paws crossed, chest rising slow and steady. "I think I'm just making up for lost time," she whispered. "Maybe," Walter said. "Or maybe this was always in, you just needed the right kind of silence to hear it." The days passed with a rhythm now. Mornings were for commands. Midday was for walks. Afternoons for naps and sketches. Evenings, Ariana read out loud to him in her room. Mostly her old graphic novels and some silly poetry, but Valor would always lie there, tail thumping softly when she paused. She even taught him a new word. Home. "Ready to go home, Valor?" she'd say after each walk. He'd pause, then look back at her and trot ahead, leading her back to the porch. Every time, her chest swelled with something that felt a little like pride, a little like redemption. Mr. Walter never said much, just watched from his porch, a small smile curling beneath his white mustache. But one evening, as Ariana clipped the leash onto Valor's collar and he sat without being told, Mr. Walter looked at her and simply said, "He's yours now, not just because you feed him, but because he chose you back." Ariana looked down at Valor, strong, alert, still scarred but no longer hollow, and whispered, "Thank you." He nudged her hand. She didn't need words to know what he meant. They were both still healing. But for the first time, they weren't doing it alone. It started with silence. Not the awkward kind, but the curious kind. The kind that followed Ariana through the school hallway that Monday morning, not out of malice, but out of sheer disbelief. The girl who once flinched at barking, who rolled her eyes at dirty paws, who'd once called the German Shepherd a mistake on 4 legs, now had paw prints on her jeans and a quiet light behind her eyes that no one could quite name. "Is that real?" someone had whispered as she passed by. holding a leash looped with braided cord and a tag that simply read Valor. It didn't take long for the whispers to become questions. Did you really train him? He protected you? Like, for real? Wait, that was your house on the news? Ariana didn't brag. She didn't need to. Valor had done the talking with his teeth, his courage, and the way he'd stood in front of her like a wall of fur and fury that night. The story spread like wildfire, even though she never posted a word. People remembered, and people changed. Even Chloe. One afternoon, while Ariana was tying her bike outside the art building, she saw her former friend, the same one who'd once laughed when Ariana tripped in front of the whole cafeteria standing at the edge of the sidewalk, arms stiff, face unsure, and beside Ariana, tail flicking softly, was Valor. Chloe cleared her throat. "Hey!" Ariana looked up. "I heard about everything," Chloe mumbled. "The break-in, the dog, you, I mean." Her voice wavered. "I was a jerk. You know that." Ariana said nothing. She didn't need to. Chloe crouched. Not too close. Just enough so Valor could see her clearly. Her hand hovered mid-air. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I was scared of him. I said dumb things. But you're—" She turned her eyes to him. "You're kind of amazing." Valor looked at her, measured, alert, then gave one slow blink. Not trust. Not yet. But not rejection either. Chloe exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. She didn't stay long, just stood, dusted her hands off, and nodded to Ariana. "See you around." That night, Ariana found a bowl of clean water placed neatly by the tree outside their front yard. The next day, there were two, one with dog treats inside. By the end of the week, 6 different porches had small plastic bowls near the curb, some with notes in childlike handwriting, "For your hero, thanks for protecting Ariana, good boy Valor." It was the children who started it. The boy from 2 blocks over who once threw sticks at stray dogs now waited every morning with a biscuit in hand, hoping Valor would walk by. The elderly woman at the corner with the garden full of roses? She started saving her leftover roast for the guardian. Ariana even spotted the grumpy mailman who used to mutter curses under his breath whenever a dog barked, scratching behind Valor's ear one afternoon, a rare smile creasing his weathered face. Change didn't announce itself. It rippled quiet, soft, like sunlight spreading across water. At school, Ariana started sketching again, not hiding it this time. Her sketchbook filled with drawings of Valor in motion, running, sleeping, yawning with his pink tongue curled like a question mark. People peeked over her shoulder, admired, asked questions. One girl even asked if Ariana could draw her dog too. She said yes, and with each yes, something inside her softened the brittle edges of the girl who used to push people away now, bending, not breaking. Valor followed her like a shadow these days. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. And the town, in its quiet, cautious way, followed him too. Mr. Walter noticed it on one of their morning walks. "Funny, isn't it?" he said, tipping his cap toward the bakery window where a sticker now read, "Service animals welcome. Heroes, too." "What is?" Ariana asked, tugging Valor gently to heal. He gave her a knowing glance. How one broken thing can heal so many others just by refusing to stay broken. Ariana looked at Valor his side, still healing, his eyes always scanning, but never afraid. He paused near a bush, sniffed the air, then circled back to walk beside her again. "Not broken," she whispered. "Just rebuilding." Mr. Walter smiled. "Exactly. M's for." And as they walked on, girl, dog, and mentor, the wind carried laughter from a nearby yard. A child's voice rang out. "There's the brave one!" Valor's ears perked up. His tail wagged once, slow and sure. And Ariana felt it, too, that the world was beginning to change. Not all at once, but enough. The grass had grown back. It swayed gently in the breeze, soft green blades masking the scar of the ditch where it all began, a memory tucked beneath wildflowers and wind. Ariana stood at the edge of the park with Valor by her side, leash slack in her hand. It had been months since she'd set foot here, since that rainy day when pride blinded her and kindness sat shivering in the mud. Now, everything felt smaller. The ditch, the hill, even the anger she used to carry. "Come on," she whispered. They walked slowly, as if the ground remembered, and maybe it did. Valor sniffed the air, alert as always, but calm. His tail swayed low, not wagging but not tense either. He didn't need to be a soldier today. Just a dog. Just her dog. They reached the spot where it all started. Where the leash had first been jerked. Where a girl too proud to listen had thrown words sharper than teeth. Ariana sank to her knees in the grass, brushing her hand over the earth, as if wiping away dust from a gravestone. "I was awful," she said softly, voice barely above the rustle of leaves. Valor stood still beside her. "I mocked you," she continued. "Mocked what you were, what you'd done, and you still came back. You still saved me." The breeze caught her hair and pushed it across her face like a veil. "I don't know what that says about you," she said, wiping at her eyes. "But I know what it says about me." She reached out, fingers grazing his fur, now fuller, softer, no longer matted with rain and neglect. "I'm sorry, Valor," she whispered, "for not seeing you, for turning you into a mirror for my own shame." He looked at her, those deep amber eyes meeting hers, patient and present. Then, without a sound, Valor stepped forward, circled once, and lowered himself beside her. His head found its place on her lap, heavy and warm, like an anchor for the guilt she was finally letting go. Ariana stilled, not out of fear, out of reverence. Her hand moved gently, stroking behind his ear, and he closed his eyes not as a command, but in trust. "You shouldn't have had to save me," she murmured. "You shouldn't have had to break through glass and blood and pain just to be seen as more than a mistake." The clouds overhead parted, casting a slice of golden light on the ditch. Wildflowers bent in the breeze. The world, somehow, was still. "I should have known you were never broken," she said, just waiting for someone to stop running. Valor let out a quiet breath, not quite a sigh, more like release. His tail gave a single soft thump against the earth. Ariana smiled through the tears. "You're not just my dog. You're my beginning." They sat like that for a long while, girl and dog, survivor and protector, wrong and redemption, until even the wind seemed to hush around them. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. A bird trilled. The park was alive again. And for the first time, the past didn't sting. It settled. A part of the soil, a part of the story. Ariana leaned down, pressed her forehead to his, and whispered, "Thank you for staying." "Oh." The afternoon sun filtered through the trees like soft gold, catching on dust motes and drifting pollen. The neighborhood park had become quieter since Valor's return. A strange kind of quiet, like reverence. Ariana walked its paths now with confidence, her eyes no longer avoiding anyone's gaze. Valor wasn't with her this time. He was resting, healing still. But something he had given her, something deeper than bark or bite, walked beside her anyway. That's when she heard it. A sharp whistle, then laughter. The kind of laughter that comes not from joy, but from power unchecked. She turned the corner and saw them. 3 boys, maybe a year or 2 older than her, gathered around the base of a large oak. One had a slingshot. Another stooped to gather more pebbles. The third was already winding his arm back, aiming at something in the crook of the branches. A squirrel, small, trembling, clinging to the bark with tiny white paws. Ariana froze. The moment seemed pulled from a memory, the kind of thing she might have ignored once, or worse, laughed along with. That girl was gone now, gone with the rain, and the night Valor bled on her floor. "Stop!" she called, her voice cutting through the air like a snapped twig. The boys turned, startled. The one with the slingshot smirked. "What are you, the squirrel police?" "You don't need to do that," she said, walking toward them, slower now, but steady. "He's just scared." Yeah? Well, it's fun," the tallest kid said, loading another stone. Ariana stepped in front of the tree. "Don't," she said quietly. The boys exchanged glances. One of them chuckled. "Why do you care? It's just an animal." Her fists clenched. And for a moment, she wasn't standing in the park anymore. She was back in her bedroom, whispering, "I'm sorry," to the silence. She was back in the vet's waiting room, hands slick with dog blood and guilt. She was back at the ditch, feeling a head rest on her lap like forgiveness. She drew in a breath, held it, let the silence swell, and then she spoke. "He probably has a name," she said. They blinked. "What?" "That squirrel. Maybe someone rescued him once. Or maybe he has babies in a tree somewhere waiting for him. Maybe he remembers being hungry, or cold, or chased. The boy scoffed, but she didn't stop. Not everything with fur is yours to aim at just because you can. Not everything weak is worthless. Some of the bravest hearts come in the smallest bodies. She looked up into the tree, at the tiny creature still frozen against the bark, and something caught in her throat, not from fear, but from knowing. I used to think I was better than animals, she said, more to herself now, until one nearly died saving me. Silence. The tallest boy let the pebble fall from his fingers. The one with the slingshot shifted uncomfortably. Ariana didn't expect applause. She didn't even expect them to care. But something shifted in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks or a tide turns. The boys muttered something, then turned and walked away, kicking at the grass. The squirrel didn't move, not right away. Then slowly, it scampered higher into the safety of the tree, disappearing into leaves. Ariana stood there, letting her breath go in one long exhale. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't needed to. Sometimes standing up for what's right didn't mean charging into fire. Sometimes it just meant not looking away. She turned to walk home, the sunlight catching on her hair, her shadow long behind her. And in that shadow walked everything she'd learned. The backyard of Mr. Walter's house had never felt this alive. Paper lanterns swayed from strings hung between the trees, casting warm, golden light that flickered like fireflies. A folding table was lined with mismatched trays of cookies, lemonade, and bowls, filled with treats that smelled suspiciously of beef jerky, all donated by neighbors. Balloons rustled gently in the summer breeze. One tied loosely to the handle of a leash looped around a lawn chair. And there, in the center of it all, sat Valor. His bandages had come off days ago, revealing scars that told stories of their own. But his posture was strong, proud. The silver fur at his muzzle shimmered under the lights. Every time someone approached, he would glance toward Ariana as if asking for permission. And every time she smiled and gave a small nod. He stayed close to her always. It had only been a few weeks since the night of the break-in, but in the eyes of the town, this wasn't just a thank you party. It was a quiet ceremony, a reckoning, a healing. Mr. Walter clinked a spoon against his mug and raised his voice, gentle but steady. Friends, neighbors, tonight we're not just celebrating a dog. He paused, and a few heads turned toward Valor, who blinked slowly. We're honoring courage, loyalty, and the way one brave creature reminded us what protection really looks like, not with force, but with heart. Applause broke out, soft and reverent, and I think someone else here has a few words she'd like to say. Ariana stiffened slightly. Her heart thudded once, loud in her chest, but she stood. Valor looked up at her, then rested his head calmly on his paws. She stepped up to the makeshift porch step stage, clutching a folded paper in her hand, though she wouldn't need it. Hi, she began, her voice trembling a little. Most of you know I wasn't always very nice, especially not to him. She looked down at Valor. He was watching her, unblinking, solid, forgiving. I thought I was being funny. I thought it didn't matter. Her throat tightened. But it did. It mattered a lot. The crowd hushed, even the smallest children looking up in silence. The night he came back, the night he saved me, again something in me cracked open, and I saw what I'd been too scared to admit. I was wrong. She glanced down at her hands. Sometimes we hurt things we don't understand. Sometimes we turn our backs on kindness just because it comes in a different form. She folded the paper slowly, held it against her chest. But Valor taught me that we all deserve a second chance, even the ones who bark, even the ones who bleed, especially the ones who don't give up. A pause. Thank you for not giving up on me. She stepped back. The wind picked up, as if in applause of its own. People clapped, not wildly, but with a kind of softness that carried more weight, like gratitude tied with ribbon. Some wiped at their eyes. Even Chloe, standing awkwardly near the punch bowl, gave a single nod. Mr. Walter gave Ariana a squeeze on the shoulder as she returned to her seat on the blanket near Valor. He nestled closer to her, pressing the full weight of his body against her side. It was like he understood every word. The evening wound down slowly. People lingered. Strangers shared stories. One boy knelt beside Valor and gently offered a dog biscuit, only to laugh when Valor took it with a surprisingly dainty bite. Someone began humming a tune that Ariana couldn't name, and soon others joined in no lyrics, just harmony. And through it all, Valor remained by Ariana's side, quiet, watchful, content. The girl who once mocked him had become his keeper, and he, her guardian. Not because he was told, but because he chose to be. The morning sun filtered gently through Ariana's window, casting golden streaks across the wooden floor where Valor lay curled near her feet. He had taken to sleeping there lately, not because he was guarding, but because he wanted to be close. Even in rest, he listened. The twitch of his ear at every distant sound, the subtle lift of his head when Ariana stirred. He was never fully off duty, and yet something in him had softened just enough to feel like home. Ariana sat cross-legged beside him, sketchpad abandoned on the rug. Her fingers hovered above his shoulder, hesitating, as if touching a sacred place. The fur was shorter there now, jagged in a crescent where the vet had shaved him before surgery. A dark scar traced the memory of that night, raw, brutal, undeniable. But the skin beneath it had healed. Not pretty, but whole. She gently touched it, and he didn't flinch. Her fingertips grazed the raised line slowly, reverently, like tracing a history she had once tried to ignore. "I used to think scars were ugly," she said softly. Her voice was barely more than breath. Valor shifted slightly, his head lifting just enough to nuzzle her wrist in response. But now, she swallowed. Her eyes stung, not with tears, but something deeper, a gratitude so big it ached. "Now I think they're proof." He tilted his head. "Proof that you stayed, that you fought, that you mattered." She leaned down until her forehead rested gently against his. "You're the most beautiful soul I know." For a long, quiet moment, they stayed like that girl and dog, past and present, wound and balm. His breath was slow and even, warm against her cheek. Outside, the world went on. Bicycles whirred past the fence, someone watered flowers across the street, and wind stirred the chimes on the porch. But in that room, time paused. Ariana smiled, not the forced kind she used to offer in school pictures, but the kind that grew from somewhere honest, somewhere hard-earned. She looked at Valor again, really looked. His limp was still there, barely noticeable now, but it had changed the way he moved. Slower, more careful, but not weaker, wiser. He got up, stretched with a groan that made her giggle, and padded to the door. His tail gave a soft wag, not urgent, just patient. "Walk time?" she asked. A woof. It had become their rhythm, their promise to greet the day, no matter how it had begun. She grabbed his leash, but didn't clip it on. Not anymore. He didn't need it. He never ran far. They stepped out into the morning light together, his shadow brushing hers, her steps slowing to match his. People on the sidewalk waved. One man tipped his cap. "Still limping, huh, hero?" Valor barked once, in response a bark that sounded suspiciously smug. Ariana grinned. "He says he wears it like a medal." The man laughed. "That he does, sweetheart, that he does." As they reached the corner, she glanced down again at that scar, that beautiful, brutal, perfect line of survival, and whispered, "I hope mine are as brave as yours one day." Valor looked up, his eyes dark and knowing, and somehow she believed he understood. The sun had barely crested the rooftops when the front door creaked open. Valor stood patiently at the threshold, ears alert but relaxed, tail giving a slow, familiar wag. "Ready, buddy?" Ariana's father asked, already holding the leash, though they rarely needed it anymore. Valor barked once, low and content. Ariana watched from the window as her dad stepped out in his flannel jacket, still yawning, and gave the leash a light tug more out of habit than need. Her mom followed with a thermos in hand, sipping coffee, her other hand slipping naturally into her husband's. It had become their quiet ritual. Every morning, rain or shine, they took Valor on a short walk around the block, no longer as a task, but as a gesture, a shared act of gratitude. She still remembered the early days, how hesitant they were, unsure of how much space this dog needed, whether his past made him unpredictable. But now, he was woven into the rhythm of the household, a heartbeat in the family. She stepped into the backyard and smiled at what her mom had built. It had started small, just a wooden crate of chew toys tucked under the oak tree. Then came the custom nameplate, Hero's Corner, carved and painted in warm brown tones, hung just above a shelf that displayed Ariana's sketches of valor. Some were recent, the gentle droop of his ears when he was sleepy, the proud pose he struck during their walks. Others captured the earlier days, the scars, the uncertainty, the way he used to hover near doors like he was always waiting to be sent away again. Now he had a place. His place. There was a small garden of marigolds blooming near his water bowl. Her mom said they were for protection, not that Valor needed it. But Ariana liked the symbolism. The bright yellow felt like hope, like the kind that stays. She reached down and fluffed one of his favorite plush balls, a once red squeaky toy now faded and missing an ear. He didn't play with it much anymore, but he always laid near it when he napped. Inside, her parents' voices drifted in through the open window, soft, laughing. Her father said something about picking up new tennis balls for Valor on the way home. Her mother replied with something about baking dog biscuits. A year ago, none of this would have existed. There wouldn't have been space in their minds or hearts for a creature like Valor, let alone a scarred, wounded ex-police dog. Ariana hadn't even imagined asking. But he had carved a place. Not by force, not even by heroics, but by being there, steadily, silently, by never leaving. She crouched beside the corner, brushing her fingertips over the sketch she loved most, the one where she'd drawn him sleeping, head in her lap, a soft smile on her own face as she looked down at him. The caption she'd written at the bottom still made her throat catch. Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's who stays when it's hardest to. She looked up as the side gate opened, and Valor trotted in first, leash trailing. He made a beeline for her, pressing his body gently against her legs. "Good walk?" she asked, ruffling his ears. Her father chuckled behind him. "We think he's memorized every tree on the street." "Oh." Her mother smiled and stepped forward, placing a folded blanket onto the corner bench. "Thought we'd let him sunbathe out here today." Ariana nodded, heart full. As Valor settled onto the soft blanket, tail thumping once, then again, she leaned her head against her mother's shoulder. "He really is home now, isn't he?" she whispered. Her mom wrapped an arm around her. "No," she said, voice gentle. "We're home now, because of him." And Valor, eyes half-lidded in the morning light, let out a slow, contented sigh, the kind only made by those who no longer need to look over their shoulder. The sky above them was a soft watercolor streaks of apricot and pale lavender melting into one another as the sun dipped behind the trees. Ariana sat cross-legged on the grass, a blank note card in her lap. Beside her, Valor lay stretched out, his head resting just inches from her knee. His breathing was slow and steady, calm, like the day itself. In her hand, she held a pen that had once belonged to her grandfather, the one who taught her to write things she couldn't say aloud. She hesitated for a long moment before putting the tip to the paper. "Dear me. From back then. I don't blame you. You were scared. You didn't understand the weight behind the words you said. You didn't know that pain wears many faces, even the quiet kind with fur and broken ribs. You called him ugly. You thought his scars made him dangerous. You didn't see the beauty in what survived. But I do now. I see it every day." She paused, eyes flicking to Valor's flank, where the fur still parted slightly around the faded scar on his shoulder. He shifted in his sleep, one paw twitching gently as if chasing something kind in a dream. "Thank you for growing, for staying open even when it hurt, for learning to listen with more than your ears. And to the one I once feared, Valor, I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner. I'm sorry I looked away from your pain. I'm sorry I mistook your silence for something dangerous. But you stayed. You stood between me and the worst moment of my life, twice. You didn't have to forgive me, but somehow you did. And because of that, I'm better. We're better. Together." Her throat tightened. She let the pen fall to the grass and pressed her palm gently to his chest. The soft rise and fall beneath her fingers reminded her of the first time she thought he wouldn't make it the waiting room. The smell of antiseptic, the sobs she tried to swallow, and now this. Peace. Ariana folded the note carefully, then reached for Valor's collar, tucked between the stitching and the tag that read, "Retired K9, Valor." She slid the letter in a secret only he would carry. "Just in case you ever wonder," she whispered. "You changed everything." She leaned back, letting the tree behind her take her weight. The grass was cool, and the evening breeze tickled the ends of her hair. Valor stirred, adjusted himself, and without opening his eyes, shifted until his head rested lightly against her hip. Ariana smiled through the sting in her eyes. Two shadows stretched across the lawn, one small and human, the other broad and four-legged side by side beneath the swaying branches of the old oak tree. From the window, her mother watched in silence, a dish towel still clutched in her hand. Her father stood beside her, arm draped gently across her shoulders. They didn't speak. Some moments didn't ask for words. Outside, Ariana reached over and ran her fingers once more along the fur just above Valor's collar, the faint rustle of the note hidden beneath. There was something full about this moment, something complete. Not a finish line, but a gentle exhale after the hardest part of the journey. And as the sky faded into night, girl and dog lay there not just survivors, but healers of one another. Two souls that had been broken, now whole, together. In a world that often moves too fast to notice the quiet ones, this story reminds us to slow down and truly see. What began with fear and misunderstanding grew into an unshakable bond between a girl and a German shepherd once cast aside. Valor, with his scars and silent strength, became more than a protector. He became a mirror reflecting back courage, compassion, and the power of second chances. This isn't just a tale about a dog. It's about empathy, about the belief that no soul is beyond redemption. It's about the quiet healing that happens when love is chosen, again and again. German shepherds, known for their loyalty and intelligence, embody more than physical bravery. They show us emotional depth, unwavering presence, and devotion without condition. Through Ariana's journey, we're reminded that the most profound transformations often begin with a small gesture. A whispered apology, an outstretched hand, a bowl of water left on the sidewalk. Let this story be a call not just to protect animals, but to listen to them, to open our hearts, and to believe that even in a wounded world, love, pure, fierce, and unspoken, still has the final word.